If you're a content creator of
ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, children of all ages, it is that time again for the thing that we all love most, the next installment of the Old Uncle Distilling Company Whiskey Happy Hour. I am your host, the Old Humble Guy. Welcome and cheers. I have had this cough since 3 o'clock this afternoon. I do not know what is causing it. Let's get that music off here, shall we? Gary, turn that down. Thank you. I do not know what's causing it. It's probably just an allergy attack. I hope it's an allergy attack, but man, it took the wind completely out of my sails this evening. I have been lethargic and tired and just clean worn out, and it is driving me absolutely bananas. But you guys, I'm not going to let that stop us from having a good time tonight. We're going to go back to an old topic that I enjoy talking about because it's such nonsensical. And it's funny to me. It makes me laugh. It really does. We're going to talk about cancel culture tonight. But before we get to that, let's do the quick little housekeeping. Don't forget to like and subscribe and do all the proper YouTube-y stuff. I appreciate the support. The channel appreciates the support, and it will help us to bring even better content to you. Next month, actually starting Saturday, we're going to have live music. And then next month on Fridays, beginning at the beginning of April and going all the way through the end of May, I have a lineup of bands that will be performing, that will be performing live at the distillery every Friday night. We will be bringing Friday Night Live from the Old Humble Distilling Company. Live bands, music, entertainment every week, beginning at the beginning of April, going all the way through the end of May and forward into the ether. I don't know how long it's going to go, but the plan is to have a band every Friday night and live stream that band here on this channel. So subscribe, hit the notification bells, do all that stuff that you need to do so that you don't miss a fantastic performance and an awesome show. Tomorrow night, trivia night. We're going to do trivia night tomorrow night. Classic 1980s Trivial Pursuit questions. And the questions will appear on the screen like so. Down here. Boop, there it is. That's where the questions will appear. You will answer the questions in chat. Everybody who gets a correct answer gets a point. All the points get totaled up. The person with the most points gets a $15 certificate of boozy bucks to be spent anywhere you want at the Old Humble store. On anything you want at the Old Humble store. This cough, holy shit. This is my Old Humble Rye, our double oak straight rye. It is delicious. It is in stores. In the last 2 weeks of the month, I will be going out and doing tastings all over the city of Houston, Kingwood, Porter, Atascocita, as well as Austin, Texas. So, if you have been waiting to get a sample, this is your opportunity. I will be out and about. The full schedule will be posted when it is confirmed through the stores. So what else do I have to update? What else do I have to say? I think that's it. I mean, really, I think that's it. I mean, we can pretty much just jump in to the topic And like I said, don't forget to like and subscribe. I will appreciate your subscription so much that when we get 550 subs, I'll give away a bottle of whiskey, and then we will do our five. I owe y'all a 500 subscriber special. I plan to do something explosive. I was going to be staying in a cemetery that is not at all haunted. There's no drama in staying in a cemetery that's not haunted, but there is drama in exploding something. So we will do something explosive for our 500 subscriber special. Called a bit of an audible on that one, and then we will then plan for our 600 subscriber special, which hopefully will be right on the heels of our 500 subscriber special. And meanwhile, when we hit 550, I'll give away a bottle of whiskey. So come on, get on in there. Do your subscription, do your subbing, do the thing that you're supposed to do as loyal and attentive YouTubers. I've done my part. I said it. I mean, now it's. I guess the next part, which is also my part, is doing my best to make good live streams, and that's what we're working on doing. So come and join us, shall you? Shall we? I've got my drink. You got your drink? Let's talk about what exactly is cancel culture and how exactly it works. I've been on record in the past and I've said it in the past, and I will say it again. I will say it from the rooftops. I will say it from the bridges. I will say it to anybody who will listen. Cancel culture is not a thing. It's and well, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. Cancel culture, as we know it, is not a thing, or as we've been led to believe. It's we've been led to believe. Let me clarify this. We've been led to believe that there's a woke mob sitting in the shadows waiting for somebody to step out of line and say the wrong thing or the right thing with the wrong inflection or whatever, and just the slightest little misstep, regular normal everyday good people, the slightest misstep, and then bam, you get hit with the ban hammer. The mob comes after you, and you lose your job, and you lose your livelihood, and you lose your family, you lose your friends, you have to sell your house, you have to move, you have to change your name. Meh, 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 meh. Bullshit. That is not a thing. That does not happen. Um, Granted, the mob comes after innocent people. I'm not saying the mob doesn't exist. The mob comes after people. The mob goes after people all the time. The mob does come after innocent people. But here's what happens when you're not when you have made a legitimate mistake, when you made an honest mistake. You stand up and say, "Look, I made an honest mistake. I apologize." And then maybe the mob is like, "Oh no, he's lying. He's a dirtbag." Nah, 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 nah. And you're like, "Dude, look, I'm not a dirtbag. Here's like my body of work. Here's who I am. Here's what I do. Relax." Like, not true. And your friends stand up and say, "Yeah, not true. He's not a dirtbag. He's not." And then, your family stands up and says, "Yeah, he's not a I mean, granted, it's a rigorous I don't want to say vetting process. It's a rigorous, gut-wrenching type of process where everybody, everybody goes through this ringer. But yeah, good. I mean, people who maintain social, the who adhere to community standards and adhere to, within their communities, they stick to the standards. They're fine. Who cares? Who gives a shit? This this all these histrionics of people freaking out about it is just not a thing. It's not. It's not a thing that people need to be freaked out about. Now, if you're a dirtbag, yeah, you should be freaked out about it because who wasn't worried about uh, uh, what stuff like the Me Too mob that was dragging people for years. You know who's not worried about that? People who are not sexual predators. I mean, somebody. We all have that friend. We all know that guy. We all know that guy who is like, oh my God, somebody's gonna nail me for trying to, I'm getting a little bit too familiar with someone, and then I'm gonna get nailed with sexual harassment. I'm not gonna be able to do this, that, or the other thing. Meh, meh, meh. We all know that dude, and that dude's a fucking pervert, and you know it. He should be worried about it because he's a dirtbag. You know that guy. I know a guy who's like that. You know a guy who's like that. We all know a guy who's like that, and he's a dirtbag. You don't leave your girlfriend alone with him, and you tell him straight up that you're a dirtbag, you're a pervert, and we know what you're up to. You don't leave you don't leave them alone around the people you care about. We all know those people. We all know those people. We also know those people who are kind of dirtbaggy. They're dirtbag-ish, but they're not really dirtbags. And uh, those are the people who they're not legitimately worried about that shit either. They're not worried about saying the wrong thing in front of the wrong people at the wrong time. They're not, because they know they're not dirtbags. They're like deep down in their heart, they're not really dirtbags. They may put on a good act, but they're not dirtbags. And they're not dirtbags. And everybody knows they're not dirtbags. Strangers may not know they're not dirtbags, but that's fine. There's also this myth that we have to be accepted by everybody, everywhere, all the time. Um, and if you're going out and you're doing a thing, and the cool kids don't let you sit at their table, then oh no, I'm being canceled by those. Like that's you don't. We don't have to be a part of every single community, and every single like all of the population isn't a part of one single community everywhere. Everybody doesn't have to belong with every group everywhere. Like for example, Nazis and white supremacists. They can be perfectly happy among other Nazis and white supremacists. They don't have to be accepted on college campuses or at the Rotary Club or, I don't know, name an organization. They don't have to be accepted there. And you're not canceling them. You're just saying, look, this community has a specific standard. We won't put up with that shit. Go off and be with your other Cro-Magnon friends, and that's fine. Um, there are certainly communities wherein a distiller is not welcome. I'm fine with that. I'm not being canceled by the Teetotalers Association or the pearl clutching biddies of the city of Humble. I'm not being canceled. I'm just not welcome in that organization, in those communities. And quite honestly, I don't want to be welcomed in those communities because they're not particularly a lot of fun. Um, and it's not a place where I ply my wares, and it is not a fertile ground wherein I will find a market for my goods or for my humor, for that matter. So, what is it really? What it is really, and what actually exists, is basically just communities, associations, groups of people saying, "Look, we're not going to put up with this shit. We don't want to put up with this shit." And it's what has traditionally been what we would call today cancel culture is a thing that was just it was literally setting community standards, and it had always been done. It has always been done in the halls of power all over this country, up and down from the tippy top levels to the very bottom levels. It has always been done in this country. Whether it's telling an entire group of people that you can't use this entrance or that water fountain or stay in this hotel or be in this town after dark, or telling entire groups of people you're not allowed to go to school, you're not allowed to own property, you're not allowed to uh, run for office, you're not allowed to vote. There are entire groups of people that have been excluded from the halls of power, that have been excluded from decision making, that have been excluded from jobs. And I'm not just talking about minorities, I'm talking about women, I'm talking about people who were not born to the right families, I'm talking about people that didn't go to the right schools, I'm talking about uh, uh, all kinds of criteria that communities establish standards in order to protect their communities. That's how communities define themselves and protect their standards. Some communities are more open and more inviting than others. That's a fact of life. Some communities are much less inviting and less open to inviting others. Uh, Golf clubs, country clubs had been that way for years and years and years and years and years prior to and including the 1990s. I mean, Jesus Christ, Tiger Woods won a Masters at Augusta, and he wasn't even allowed at the time when he won his first Masters. He wasn't even allowed to be a member at the club because that club had specific standards. I mean, those standards for a private club were actually still legal in the 1990s. In fact, I think they're still legal now for private clubs to exclude minorities and Jews and stuff like. I think it's still legal. I may be incorrect on that. Chat, feel free to light me up if I'm incorrect about private clubs being able to exclude minorities and uh, religions and things like that. But even specifically religions, holy shit! Like if you want to work for certain churches, you have to be of that certain religion. It's kind of a gray area with regard to discrimination law. But if it's considered to be a part of a necessary requirement for doing the job, um, a Baptist school, for example, can exclude teachers from working at the school unless they are, at the very least, nominal Baptists. Um, I don't think that that's the case in something like if it's a church affiliated hospital. I don't think you have to be like a Catholic to work at a Catholic hospital because doctor is the more important criteria than Catholic. But there's are, and I don't think that's also the case with like receptionists and administrative work. But in other venues like schools and things like that, they can absolutely exclude you from being a teacher if you are not of the right faith, if you're trying to work in a denominated school. Um, and there's a man, this has been a atrocious allergy attack. Holy crap. Since I've been coughing like this since about 3 o'clock, and it has been driving me absolutely nuts. I would I am actually quite curious to hear from chat. Has there been any circumstance that y'all know of in chat where there's been an unfair mob that has taken down somebody who was lily, I don't want to say lily white and innocent, but uh, innocent, clean as the fresh blown snow? That's a term, right? That's a phrase. I can't remember. Anyway, I'm curious to know because I've never met anybody. I have never met a single person. In fact, I haven't seen very many stories. Probably the closest story that I've seen of a guy getting taken down by a woke mob is probably Al Franken, who was who was caught in the crossfire. Well, he did a legitimately dirtbag thing, but he did a legitimately dirtbag thing that's dirtbag by today's standards, but not for it would be dirtbag for today's standards for a senator, but not a dirtbag thing for a comedian. It was probably a violation of her trust. Certainly a violation of her trust, and probably a violation of decency. But I mean, dude had to resign from his job because Kirsten Gillibrand was planning on running for president. That was basically how that whole shit went down. And he's just about on at the end of his redemption arc. He's probably going to run for office again in the next 6 months, or in the next 6 years, rather, not 6 months. Either this cycle or the next cycle, he'll run for office again. But neither here nor there. There was a dude in my old neighborhood who he shot his neighbor's dog. He shot his neighbor's dog. He owned an air conditioning company, and he shot his neighbor's dog, and the community mob went on the offensive, straight up on the offensive about this guy. A handful of people came to his defense early, um, but as the drumbeat started to continue, and then the people came to his defense, and everything kind of quieted down a little bit. They were like, "Look, this guy's job. This is this guy's business. His business does good work. He's a decent. I've never had a bad run-in with the guy." And then, like the rest of the story came out about how he lured the dog out of his neighbor's backyard and into his backyard, and then he shot the dog from above, like through the back of the head. Um, Not in a defensive position, but in a quite offensive position. And then all the other stories about this dirtbag started coming out about how he had, all the other stuff that he had done that was like not exactly over the line, but certainly showing tendencies for him to be a complete and total dirtbag asshole. I don't know if he managed to keep his business and his business survive. I'm sure he still has his business. Um, I mean, he runs an air conditioning business. Air people in Texas, people in Houston especially, they will forgive an awful lot of stuff as long as you keep the air conditioning cool in your house. But like his entire, I don't want to say his world was turned upside down because he wasn't like full on just. I mean, he wasn't Bill Cosby. You know what I mean? He was. I mean, he went through it, and deservedly so. He lured his neighbor's dog out of the backyard and shot it in his own backyard, um, because it was barking. Uh, and this was, I mean, this was this guy's mo, and he was a remarkable dirtbag. And it turns out he was just a little bit racist too. He was one of those guys. He was he was kind of a he was just kind of a general dirtbag. Um, and he was one of those general dirtbags where like he would like tiptoe up to the line but never really cross the line, and then he just like hatched this plot out of his deep dirtbag nature of he went and he got dog treats and he lured this dog out of his neighbor's backyard with the dog treats, brought him into his own backyard, and shot him while he was eating a dog treat. That's what he did. That is exactly what he did. And then everybody, like all the other stuff, like on the fringe of like how he was like a dirtbag and how he would point guns at kids, uh, not of people like who were making too much noise in the street and stuff like that. And he would just, you know, and it was like, oh, that's just that guy. That's just what he does. He wouldn't hurt anybody. He's just being, you know, hmm, he was a fucking dirtbag, is what he was. And people tried to come to his defense. Originally, people did come to his defense, but like the body of his work showed him to be who he was. Um, and that was one of those. That was probably the first time I had seen something like that happen in real time. Because everything else, all these other stories you hear about after the fact, and you kind of see the aftermath. You don't really see the story as it starts, and then it sways one way, and then it starts to sway the other way. I mean, if all the other stuff about this dude had not come out, like the story that he was trying to say was that this dog was yapping and yapping and yapping and yapping, jumped over the fence, and then chased him into his yard, and then he was just defending himself. But that was the story that he started with, and that was not how the events ultimately played out. There wasn't like camera, there wasn't video about with this or anything like this. This was like I want to say it was 15 years ago. It was a while back, but communities have set these standards forever. They've set these standards forever. There's actual banishment from towns and cities that would happen. The Bible talks about taking people and putting them outside the tribe and making them walk behind everybody for base. I mean, standards that they would have. Adultery, you get stoned, not the good kind of stoned, like the bad kind of stoned with like rocks. Um, Leprosy, obviously, they would cast you out of the community. If you had leprosy, you have to go and scrub yourself up and get clean. The New Testament stuff talks about how you should approach a brother or sister who, with whom you have a disagreement. You approach them one on one, then you bring somebody else, then you bring a leader in the church, priest. I think they use the term priest uh, because they were, still ostensibly Jewish at the time. You bring a priest, and then if y'all can't settle your disagreement, then you have a vote with the congregation, and they choose to kick you out or kick them out. They will make the choice for you if that's how you want to go. I think it's Timothy, the book of Timothy. They describe all, which is a letter to Timothy, but they describe all this stuff, the whole progression and escalation of the problem. What we would call that today cancel culture, but it is just simply setting a standard for your community. Going around and saying, look, you can't paint your house fluorescent pink. We agree. We live in a homeowners association. We live in a neighborhood with a homeowners association. We agree. Like we're going to set a basic community standard in order to protect our community, our property values in the community. We're going to set this standard. Some of those deed restrictions, by the way, if you look at the old ones from like the 1940s and 1950s, they are fucking racist. They are really, 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 really racist, and it is despicable. Absolutely despicable. Um, Garden Oaks down here in Houston, really not really cute little neighborhood. Garden Oaks. You can't have uh, more than two black people living on the property, and they can't live in the main house. They can only live in uh, an unattached building, like a garage apartment, and they can only be two of them. There can't be if they have a child, they have to leave because it's supposed to be like the servants' quarters. That is in the deed restrictions. Yep, they've never changed them because it would take too much work to change those things. True story. There's an entire neighborhood called Meyerland here in Houston because River Oaks wouldn't let Jews live in River Oaks, so the Jews went and built Meyerland. Yep, that is a true history fact here in the city of Houston. We have in the city of Humble, we have a cemetery called the Pipe Yard Cemetery, the haunted cemetery that I was going to spend a night in. We have a haunted cemetery just on the outskirts of town because in the I think it was the 1890s or early 1900s, the city fathers said, we are going to make this a white town, a lily white town. And if you are a minority or a person of color, you have to leave. And that includes your dead relatives. So dig them up and move them over there. True story. Um, Communities have been setting standards for decades, years, centuries, even. But the difference today is that with social media and with organizing and with using a voice, peer to peer, direct voice and direct organization, people who aren't in power can set those standards and be held accountable for their despicable, shitty behavior and actions. So, people who are gatekeepers in industries who decide, I think I'll just whip my dick out and masturbate here in front of these comics, those guys, they get called out on it by the comics who are like, that's kind of a shitty thing to do. And we felt like we had to be there and we felt like we had to watch it because if we said something, he was, we felt like he held his career or our career and his dick in his hands. We didn't have a choice. We didn't feel like we had a choice. But, once they get out from underneath, so to speak, his thumb, they can say something about it. They can use their voice. They can speak out, say something about it. And there were several powerful men. They all had most of them, there was a couple of exceptions, but for the vast majority of them, they had pretty much everything in common. They were old, rich, white, powerful men who were being held accountable for their shitty behavior and shitty actions. And when old, rich, powerful men are being held accountable for their shitty behavior and shitty actions, they have a focus group that comes up with a term that gets workshopped and tested, and they determine that cancel culture is the term that reacts and resounds, reverberates among the people that they're trying to get out to vote. That's why cancel culture wasn't a term that was in the common vernacular prior to 2017. Before 2017, cancel culture was hardly ever used. It was a term that was used in uh, mostly Black Twitter and in certain Reddit forums. And that's mostly where you would find it, and you would only find it occasionally and in rare circumstances. But after 2000, late 2016, 2017, when one particular person and one particular group of people uh, started using this term widely and frequently, well, all of a sudden it gets injected into common culture because there's a vast community and vast group of specific individuals who were like, well, we don't want to be called out for our shitty behavior. And that's how we got to know the term that we know and love today is cancel culture because it was some powerful men who were not very keen on being called. They wanted their freedom, but they didn't want the responsibility that went with their freedoms. they just thought that they could use their power and wield it however they wanted, even if it was an open secret that that's how they were wielding their power. And it is, uh, I mean, it's easy to shrug your shoulders and say, that's just the way the world was. That was the way the world was. Absolutely the way the world was. And it is one thing to shrug your shoulders and say that's the way the world was. It's another thing to shrug your shoulders and say, you know, these guys climbed to the top of the mountain using tactics and behavior that was inappropriate, and they benefited from that behavior, but they shouldn't continue to benefit from that behavior. There comes a point in time where you should be able to turn around and say, look, enough's enough. You need to stop. And even Matt Lauer, who had a door lock installed, an automatic door lock installed on his office door so that he could trap people in his office and fuck them. Even he had to pay with his reputation, with his job, and honestly, with his career. He's not going to. I don't think Matt Lauer is going to be going back to work anytime soon. I don't expect to see him on TV. But we saw it with other guys, not just with sexual predators, but we saw it with other guys. Uh, and this is one of the things that leads me to say that cancel culture is not really a thing to worry about if you're not a dirtbag, because there were other people, there were other reporters who lost their job, lost their livelihood, lost their reputation. Um, Dan Rather was one of them. He he went public with a story that was not very well vetted. That what it was George Bush the younger, George W. Who President of the United States, George W. Uh, reservist, active duty Air National Guard in the state of Texas. He went public with a story that he never really showed up. He never really did his drills. It was basically enlisted, but he was not like really enlisted. It was kind of just one of those ceremonial desk jobs where you're like the vice president of golf, um, vice president of client relations, or whatever dumb title they want to give the guy who's been there for 50 years and it's time for him to retire, but they can't fire him because he's really important to the business. Um, excuse me. Uh, and it turns out that it was poorly vetted, poorly sourced, and not true. He lost his job. He lost a bit of his reputation. But over time, he came back. And he has now rebuilt his reputation. He's rebuilt with freelance journalism. He's doing fine today. It's not like he's gone. I mean, he's no longer on national TV, but he's also like 900 years old, dude. They don't want him on national TV. Um, Brian Williams, another guy who was caught fabricating details of stories and just straight up lying about details of stories. That's another dude. He he had to pay his penance. He had to leave the air. He had to leave his job. He had to leave his desk. Uh, Went into purgatory for a few years, rebuilt his reputation, came back. He's working cable. I think Brian Williams is doing some cable show now. I'm not sure. Um, I don't really pay that close attention to his career. I'm not sure. Um, but those are jobs that require integrity. Maybe Louis C.K., the jacking off into plants guy. He is, he tried to do his comeback tour. Was too soon. He was not going to get his redemption arc that early. He's still doing work. He's still working. He's still touring, but he's not touring arenas and theaters. He's touring clubs and smaller venues. He's not a headline act. He's not a headline performer. That avenue to him is gone. But he's not working. He still has a livelihood. He still has to work. He just has to work like a normal person, hard. Uh, he's not getting, $5 million creative creative development deals, oh, and stuff like that. And that's the broader point of that, I suppose. The broader benefit of that is that instead of having six or seven people who are like the kings of an industry, or performers that are the kings of the performance world, it opens it up significantly. So no single individual has that kind of power that they can just, it's just this guy. That person can be replaced with somebody else. That was one of the, as shitty as it was when Al Franken was bounced out of the Senate. One of the one of the things that was, I think, one of the things that was remarkable about that, and one of the things I think that he recognized about his particular position and uh, uh, the particular position that he was in his state, is that he could leave and he could be replaced because there was good talented people who were ready to take his spot. So it wasn't like me or nothing. It was like, me, but there's also, I'm not so important that like people can't take my place. And that's also something that's extremely important. That a lot of these people, when they step over the line and their dirtbag tendencies and their body of dirtbag work is brought into the light, a lot of these people look around and they're like, "Well, I'm the most important person. Oh my God, it's going to be a catastrophe if I get fired." Well, turns out even Matt Lauer can be replaced. Turns out, Brian Williams could be replaced. It turns out all these people could be replaced. And, they fight and fight and fight so hard to keep their spot, thinking that they can't be replaced. That they're fucking special. And that's another aspect of this, that dirtbags think that they're special. They think that they're special. They think they can't be replaced. They think that they're they're privileged in some way, that their actions and behaviors shouldn't be held against them, and they shouldn't be held accountable for their behavior. And that's another reason why they scream and cry and whine so loud that, oh my God, the mob's going to come after me if I step over the line. You know what? The mob's not going to come after you if you step out of line once. The mob is extremely forgiving. If you're not a dirtbag, you don't have anything to worry about. This boogeyman of cancel culture that, people are coming for you. Nobody's coming for you. Most people don't give a shit who you are. Most of us are completely anonymous. Even those of us who have, stupid shows on stupid YouTube, we're mostly anonymous. I could say, well, I mean, theoretically, I could say and do horrible, awful things, and it would probably blow my channel up. I'd probably get all the views and all the all the subscribers, and I'd get bad attention as well as good attention. Not the kind of attention that I want, obviously. But you know, Michael, what's his face? Michael Kramer from Seinfeld. He learned that lesson. Bad attention is not, all attention is not good attention. Sometimes bad attention is actually very bad attention. The dude lost his entire. I mean, he is no longer a stand-up. Um, and then you have people like Jerry Seinfeld who are like, I won't perform at colleges anymore because the mob is too, kids are too woke. They don't find, like, sorry, Jerry, you're just not funny to college students. He's an old guy who is not funny to college students. His humor is stuck in the 1990s. So, he can go perform in colleges. College students don't know who the hell he is. And a lot of those shows, a lot of his episodes of his show just don't hold up. They just don't. And when he tried to do that movie, the B movie, man, he's not as funny as he thinks he is. He was funny as he thought he was back in the 90s, but he's not as funny as he thinks he is anymore. That's just a fact of life. Sometimes you're you're not being canceled because you're a horrible, horrible dirtbag. Sometimes, like Kevin Sorbo, you're just being forgotten. You're actively being forgotten by popular culture. Kirstie Alley's another one who's actively being forgotten by popular culture. Both of those guys will stand up and say, "We're not getting booked because we are." They're not being booked because Kirstie Alley hasn't done anything relevant in 20 years. Kevin Sorbo hasn't done anything interesting in 10 years at least. And hell, he was up here at a convention, some kind of con. I don't know what it was, some convention thing that they were doing up here in Conroe. He was the headliner for the event. I got a marketing kit asking, showing me all the stuff that I could do as a sponsor to the event. I saw that was like their headliner was Kevin Sorbo, and I'm like, that's all you got? You don't have anybody interesting at this thing. It was Kevin Sorbo and like the seven dwarves of mediocrity and uh, mediocrity and uh, hazy forgetfulness. It was like nobody. It was an event for having an event, and it was nobody there. Who's another guy who's uh, not interesting anymore? Baio, Scott Baio. He's another guy. Complains and whines and cries, "I'm being canceled because of my political belief." Like, no, dude, you're just not interesting. You haven't done anything. Like, nobody gives a shit. Who are you? Why? Like, why are you gonna? Who wants to have you at an event to talk about a show that was a big deal in 1992? You're not being canceled. You're just not interesting. You're not like the communities, the various communities across the country. There's a handful that still want him to come and talk. They want Scott Baio and the Pillow Guy and whoever else is they can find. Most of them just they don't know who he is. They don't care. Like, what are you going to come talk about? You going to come talk about who's the boss? Cool, big deal. Um, and a lot of times that's exactly the case. And these people, instead of simply accepting the fact that they are no longer interesting, they whine and cry about, oh, cancel culture, the woke mob's gonna be, blah, blah, blah. Nobody's talking about this in the mainstream media. Meh, 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 meh. Meanwhile, like all the stories that they read about it come from the mainstream media. Uh, I mean, it's this crazy like mentality that uh, they the people crying most about this think that they should be allowed to do whatever they want with no repercussions and no accountability. They have no obligation to their. They don't feel like they have any reciprocal obligation to the people that made them famous, to the people that made them uh, who they are. They don't feel like they have any reciprocal obligation. They think they could just say and do whatever they want and get away with it. Um, and they think that they should be, in a lot of cases, they think that they should be, once they have the power, they think they should have the power forever and ever and ever. And that there will never, ever, ever be any comeuppance, that time will not move forward. You get famous for being famous, and then they think you should just stay famous forever. When the reality is that time marches on. You can be there comes a point in every performer's life that you become the guy who used to be famous. Didn't you used to be somebody? Didn't you used to do a thing? Didn't you used to be Jerry Seinfeld? You used to be somebody, didn't you, Jerry? And don't get me wrong, Jerry Seinfeld is still he for all from everything that I know about him, he's a decent guy. He's not, but he's a normal human being. He has his qualms, he has his quirkiness. He is who he is. He's not a dirtbag. He's not a bad guy. He's not a saint, but none of us are. Um, but he's also mature enough to know that he is he's on the other side of the peak of his career. He was he was at the top of his industry. He was at the top of two industries, um, and he's 2 decades past that now. He's mature enough to know that. He knows his limits, and he can say things like, "Well, I'll never perform at a college again because those kids just don't get it. They don't laugh at fun. They don't." Well, the fact is, Jerry, those kids don't laugh at jokes that are 25 years old. Uh, they just don't. They're, they have other comics that they listen to and that they laugh at their jokes and do their stuff with, and it's cool. And it happens. That happens. Um, and I can, of course, I can say that from my lowly stand down here because I am not a titan of any industry. I can say that because uh, well, because nobody fucking knows who I am. Well, they're like, who's that guy? Which is kind of my point. Jerry Seinfeld is more famous than I'll ever be, but he used to be more famous than I'll ever be, and he's still riding on the benefits of that fame and fortune and the body of work behind him. He's still riding on that, and that's fair. He should. He sits on his pile of gold. He earned it. That's his. Um, and that's an entirely different circumstance and an entirely different situation than someone like O.J. Simpson or Bill Cosby or any one of these other people. They didn't lose. Well, O.J. kind of did. He lost his fame and fortune, but Bill Cosby didn't lose his fortune. He did. He he would be an example of somebody who would have been canceled. He turns out he was drugging women in the 70s and feeding them drugs and then raping them, and just a full on dirtbag, 180 degrees from who we thought he was. America's dad, and he turns out he was a sexual predator and a full on dirtbag. He's never not going to be famous, but he's never going to be famous for being Bill Cosby again. He's going to be famous for being Bill Cosby's sexual predator for the rest of his life. He gets to wear that scarlet letter forever. But he still gets to, ride on the golden chariots that his body of work built. It just also turns out that his body of work includes being a pervert and sexual predator for eons. And the difference between Jerry Seinfeld no longer being famous and Bill Cosby no longer being famous, and I use those terms very, very, very loosely because Jerry Seinfeld is and will always be famous. He's Jerry fucking Seinfeld, as is Bill Cosby. He's Bill fucking Cosby. The difference is Jerry Seinfeld is a respected, respectable guy who's retired, where Bill Cosby was a respected, respectable guy, and he is no longer that guy. Theoretically, at least, Jerry Seinfeld could reinvent himself and come back. He could come back as a talk show host or something like that. He has that show on Netflix, Comics Driving in Cars, Getting Coffee, which is, by the way, so much fun to watch. Super fascinating. I don't want to spoil the show for you, but Comics and Cars, Getting Coffee, I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to give away like the whole plot, the whole theme, but I think you might have been able to figure this out. It's basically comics in cars, and they're going to get coffee. And it is, you wouldn't expect it to be as fascinating as it is, but it is absolutely fascinating. These people, they know how to carry on a conversation. Jerry, his comedy was always observational. But what is it with airline food? Whoa. That's where, by the way, that joke comes from, is Jerry Seinfeld. Anyway, I don't know if y'all are as familiar with that as I am, but anyway, that was one of his jokes. What's the deal with airline food? Is it chicken? Is it fish? How do we know the difference? They all taste the same. A terrible Jerry Seinfeld impersonation. He's got a show on Netflix. It'll never be Comics and Cars Getting Coffee. Will never be the Seinfeld show. It won't. It will never be. David Letterman's show that he has now on Netflix. My next guest requires no introduction, I think is the name of that show. It'll never be as big as the Letterman show was. Or Late Night. I think it was Late Night, and before that it was Late Night with David Letterman. When it was on NBC, it was Late Night with David Letterman. When it was on CBS, it was just Late Night. Or The Late Show. Yeah, it was The Late Show, I think. Doesn't matter. That's beside the point. It'll never be as big as Dave was when he was doing his talk show. He's a guy who used to be somebody. He's a guy who used to be famous. He's not as, he's still famous, but he's not as famous as he was. The difference between Jerry and Dave and Bill Cosby and Louis C.K. Is that the community, the public, not everybody in the public, obviously, but a large body of the public said they should not continue to benefit from their fame. They stood up, as they were at their peak, stood up and said, enough. Not Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby was well past his prime. But they stood up and said, enough. Enough is enough. No more. And they cut it off. Became untenable for people to hire them, work with them, operate for them. And they paid for their behavior. That's how it works. That's how it should work. Communities should be able to set those standards and enforce those standards and require people to if you're going to benefit from a community, you should be obligated to abide by the community's rules. And if you're not going to abide by the community's rules, then you should not benefit from that community any longer. And that's how what is called cancel culture works. Again, I don't believe that it is what they say it is, because I do not believe that it is a mob looking to take down innocent people for one misstep. You step on the grass and then they descend on you. Like, you're not allowed to be on the grass. Like, they only come down on you if you're like blatantly, flagrantly walking on the grass without any concern whatsoever for the signs that say "Do not walk on grass." Innocent people, I will maintain until I am proven otherwise that innocent people do not get taken down by a quote unquote woke mob. Um, on the other hand, quite contrary, innocent people can and have and will be accosted by people in power and taken down by people in power because they dared stand up and speak out. And the difference between what they consider to be cancel culture when communities set standards and the flip side of that, when people in power are handing down, um, canceling people with less power, that's the difference between uh, the people holding those in power to be accountable and people in power wielding their power uh, as a bludgeon to hold the lessers in line. And that's how Matt Lauer kept his victims subservient. That's how Bill Cosby kept his victims subservient. That's how Louis C.K. kept his victims subservient. That's how the NFL ownership keeps Colin Kaepernick in line. Or he's been blackballed, ostracized from participating in football games. He can't do it because he stepped outside of the community standards. They work both ways. The difference being, when those in power hand it down, we just call that, enforcing the rules and abiding by the rules. But when those who are under the power speak up and hold those who are in power and in lofty positions accountable, well, then it's the mob is coming after us, and we can't have that. But the truth be told, what's known as cancel culture has been happening mostly from people in power handing those rules down and keeping their lessers in line for centuries. Uh, uh, I mean, we literally have laws. We literally have laws in order to establish and enforce community standards. For decades, centuries, homosexuals were not allowed to get married. Gay, lesbian, bisexual, not allowed to get married to the people that they wanted to get married to. They had to get married to other people. If you were going to get married, you had to get married to somebody who was not, your natural compatibility. Those standards changed. Churches maintained standards. Women can't be priests until those standards changed. That gay and lesbian individuals cannot be priests until those standards changed. That you can't get married in the churches if you are a same-sex couple until those standards changed. Churches used to maintain those standards too, and we would defend churches for maintaining their standards. We would defend churches for maintaining their standards because that's what churches should be allowed to do, to maintain their standards, until it came time to change those standards. And then those standards changed dramatically and quickly all across the country because the people said these standards need to change. And they held people in high positions accountable for being hypocrites to those standards until they were no longer hypocrites and they agreed to change the standard. And that's all it is. They cry about there being community cancel culture, but it's not. It's simply communities establishing and maintaining and enforcing their standards in order to maintain a community, in order to maintain a community identity. And that said, there are thousands and thousands of communities across the United States. It is not a homogenous group of people and homogenous group of communities from Maine to San Diego and from Key West to that island. Or I guess that we go all the way up to Anchorage because Alaska is northwest of British Columbia. But Vancouver, that's what I was thinking of. Vancouver Island, and it doesn't matter. But communities that maintain those standards and they maintain their own standards. And they're disparate communities. They're fractured and far and wide. And you may not belong, or you're not going to belong to all of those communities. Some of our best politicians are able to phase shift from one place to another, and fit in and blend in with, seamlessly to communities across the country. When Gary Busey character in Blue Chips was recruiting students to play at his school, I don't remember the name of the school, but he was seamlessly transitioning between, from this church to that church to that church, and sitting at kitchen tables and dinner tables and eating whatever. Oh yeah, this is my favorite dish. Oh yeah, this is my favorite dish. Oh yeah, this is my just seamlessly blending in with families and communities all across his various communities that he was working on belonging to, so that he could recruit the kids to his school. Turns out, the spoiler alert, he paid them, or the boosters paid them, but whatever. All of those communities aren't going to accept everybody all the time. You can't be, you can't be, no, it was Abraham Lincoln said you can fool some of the people all the time and all the people some of the time, but can't fool all the people all the time. And it's the same with communities. You can be a part of some of the communities all the time, and all of the communities maybe some of the time, but you can never be part of all the communities all the time. And some are not going to accept you. And some of them you don't want to be accepted into. And there's nothing wrong with that. We should not be forced, as communities, we should not be forced to accept people who are objectionably horrible or objectively horrible people. Milos Yakov, blah blah blah, whatever that dude's name was. He wanted to go speak at Berkeley. The kids in Berkeley were like, "Fuck you! We don't want you here." They shouldn't have to have him speak there. If they don't want him to speak there, they shouldn't have to allow him to speak there. If Ted Cruz wanted to come to my wedding, I should be able to say, "Fuck you, Ted Cruz! Don't come to my wedding. I don't want you here. You're gross and you're a terrible person. Go away." If Dan Crenshaw wanted to come, eat dinner with me, I should be well within my rights to say, "No pirates allowed. Out you go, Bond villain." I should be allowed to say that. I shouldn't be compelled. There's no justifiable reason to force somebody to accept somebody into their community. There's no reason for that. We should be able to gatekeep and allow the people that we want into our community. And to be completely honest, there are certain communities that I do not belong in. I do not fit in. I do not belong in. I should not be there. I should not be a member of a community of high school virgins, because I'm not in high school and I am not a virgin. I am a 46-year-old man who has kids and a wife. I do not belong in that community. I do not. There are scores of. I could think of all kinds of groups and categories of groups and organizations of people that I don't belong in. I shouldn't be there. I don't belong there. I would not fit in, and I would not be considered to be a member of that community. I may be welcomed in as a guest. They can, you know, invite me in. We can chat. We can talk. We can be cordial. I can be there. But there's a difference, and I said this a few times in the last few days. Like there's a difference between being a member of a community and simply residing within a community. Just like there's a difference between being French and living in Paris. Just because you live in Paris doesn't make you a Frenchman. Just because you stand in a garage doesn't make you a car. Just because you walk through a barn, it doesn't make you a horse. Just because you live in America doesn't make you an American. There's a whole lot of people that live in America who you can look. They are objectively. I keep saying objectively. They're objectively not Americans. They live here, but they're not a part of our community. They're not a part of. They don't they would call themselves Americans, but when it comes down to it, they would choose themselves over their country. Um, they're not, and so that being the difference between living in America and being an American, living in Texas and being a Texan, living in Houston and being a Houstonian. There's a difference between those two. There's a whole lot of people that live in Houston who aren't Houstonians. They live here. They live here. They're staying here. They're moving on to another place when they're done. Um, there's a whole lot of people in Texas who are the same way. They live here and they will leave as soon as they get a chance to leave. They will leave. That's that's the nature of the beast. We have a large population of transient people in Texas that are coming for a while and leaving when they get a better job or another opportunity somewhere else. But when they stay here for a few years because they realize the opportunity in Texas is actually really good, they end up allowing themselves to assimilate. And then one day you look up and you go, you know what? I really am a Texan. I've been here long enough. I, I've adopted the customs of these people. They are charming and loving, and I like them, and I think I am one of them now. But we Texans, we can decide whether that's true or not. We still get the gatekeep based on what kind of boots you wear and uh, all that kind of cool stuff. Um, but you know what, kids? We're going to call this a night. My throat's still ticklish. I'm a little bit tired. This is my fifth show this week. So Monday twice, Tuesday, Wednesday. This is my fourth show this week, and tomorrow night we have a big one. Tomorrow night we have the trivia show. Classic '80s Trivial Pursuit questions. First place prize is $15. Second place prize is $10. Third place prize is $5 to be applied to any merchandise in our store. We will ship it to you. You got to pay shipping and handling. Unless you're local, then you don't have to pay shipping and handling. But tomorrow's going to be a great show. It's going to be so much fun. Lisa's going to be co-hosting with me. We're going to be doing the questions. Thanks, John Jacobs. Hang on. I can do something. Y'all don't know what I looked at chat. John Jacobs said to take care. Look at that. I got a cool new widget. Look at that. Isn't that cool? Look at there. So this is where the trivia question will be posted tomorrow night. It'll either be here or it will be up here. I haven't decided yet. But that's where the trivia question will post up. The answers will go into chat. Everybody who gets the correct answer gets a point. There will be 15 questions and possibly 2 tiebreakers because we'll have first, second, and third place. So there may be 2 tiebreakers. There will be 15 questions. It is a 2-hour show. We are doing unhinged, distillery updates, unhinged, and then trivia. So get in early, answer often. I know you've been listening. I've seen you lurking around. I got widgets that tell me who's on the show, who's in chat at least. And I appreciate the support. I appreciate you being here. Tell me how off base I am. I mean, cancel culture typically has a lot of opinions associated with it. I am firmly of the opinion that it doesn't exist. And if you're not a dirtbag, and you may get canceled out of some communities, but not canceled out of all communities. Like, for example, if you are a virulent Nazi, you are not going to be welcomed into a lot of communities. But the Nazis are going to love you. They're going to, with open arms, they're going to go, this is a brother of ours. Bring him in, or a sister, whichever. Bring him in. Come on. You're not going to be invited to a lot of Christmas parties, but you will be invited to the Christmas parties in, where are the Nazis at? Iowa? Idaho? There's like a whole community of them somewhere up there in the Plain states. Um, you know what, John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt, you are going to be the mod. I'm going to fix that right now. You're a moderator now. Congratulations, John Jacobs. You're a mod. Post something. Let's see that monkey wrench show up next to your name. I want to see it. I want to see that monkey wrench. Post something. Say hi. Say hi. Say boogers. Say something. Say anything. You're gonna get it. Come on. Come on. Wait, doesn't it take a minute for it to update? There it is. Is this that's the one? Is that what the one I'm gonna post on the window on the screen? The one with the wrench. There it is. Come on. There it is. Oh, it doesn't show on the screen there. You need to get yourself an avatar, man. Just the J is not working. Do something about that. You are now a moderator, so you need to dress your name up a little bit there, my man. Anyway, but like I said, you won't necessarily be welcome into all communities. You could go out there and say, women deserve equal rights and minorities shouldn't be discriminated against. The Nazis probably aren't going to accept you into their midst if you say things like that. And that's, for some of us, that's fine. We don't really want to be accepted into the ranks of Nazis. I mean, if I was walking around, this is just me. But if I was walking around and saying things, and a bunch of white supremacists and Klansmen and neo-Nazis come up to me and go, "Yeah, you nailed it, brother. That is 100% correct. Good job." And they started patting me on the back, I would seriously be questioning my life choices and what I was saying and what I was doing, because I don't want to. When you sleep with the dogs, you wake up with fleas. You can't exactly choose the fleas that jump on you, but you can absolutely choose which dogs you lay with. And that's kind of, that's kind of the idea behind being accepted into certain communities. There are certain communities that have undesirables associated with them, and you may not go into those communities and say, you know what, I want to hang out with those degenerates. But if you find yourself in those communities and it has those degenerates, you may want to evaluate how deeply you want to intertwine yourself with those communities. There's perfectly reasonable ways to ingratiate yourself with these groups and keep them at arm's length at the same time. Some of us and some groups are better at that than others. Some are very bad at that. And that is a fact of life. Sometimes sometimes you just can't help what fleas jump on you when you sleep with the dogs. So you got to be careful which dogs you sleep with. But there you go. That's all I'm going to say about that. I'm going to call it a night. That's it. We're going to call it a night. I'll be back tomorrow night. 9 p.m. is when our Thursday night show is. Did Tuna just showed up? Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the Tuna Empire. You are late, my main man. We are closing up shop. I'm literally like 2 minutes away from wrapping this up. But I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version since you just got here. Cancel culture is not a thing. It's called establishing community standards. And if you're not a dirtbag, you generally are not going to run afoul of community standards. Granted, there was this one time that I told my cousin, who was a lesbian, is a lesbian, and I didn't know she was a lesbian, is a lesbian. And we were talking, and she mentioned something about Sally Jesse Raphael. And I said, "Oh, Sally Jesse Raphael, she is such a man-hating dyke." And like my aunt, my uncle, my mom, and my other cousin, like ushered me out of the room, and my other cousin out of the room, and they're like, "She's a lesbian." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. Sally." Well, I mean, I don't know if Sally Jesse Raphael's actually a lesbian. I was just making a joke. She's like, "No, your cousin's a lesbian." I'm like, "Oh, then why does talking about Sally Jessy Raphael. How does that affect her? She's like, she could be offended. Like, was she? Did y'all ask her if she was offended? Needless to say, I wasn't allowed back at my aunt's house for like 6 months. I was ostracized from my aunt's house because my cousin was a lesbian and she was offended that I called Sally Jessy Raphael a man hating dyke 20 years ago. It was about 20 years ago. Something like that. But body of work, history of the individual, knowing who I was, uh, it was fine. And I mean, it's not like, we go back and forth to our aunts and uncles' houses all the time. It's just not that often. But this same cousin did get very mad at me after the not this last election, but the election before, when I was talking about establishing resistance groups and working to resist. You resist, 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 and make it hard for anything to happen. That's how we protect our interests. You resist. You form resistance groups. You plan to uh, message with send messages to your congressmen, messages to your senators, assuming that they're actual representatives. They're not. But you try to influence the political process through resistance and resistance and resistance. And she got very, very pissed off at me. Pissed off to the point of uh, poorly spelled texts that I had to sit there and try and figure out and decipher. And then when I sent her back texts saying, I don't understand what you're trying to tell me because I can't read this. Can you please explain it better? Then she'd get even madder at me. And I was like, you you're very angry. I'm not gonna talk to you until you cool down. So I'm just gonna mute you for a while. And then when you cool down, you're welcome to reach back out to me and we can talk about this again. That's been 6 years. I think I mean, she's always welcome to come back and say hi to me. I haven't like cut her out, but I think she's cut me out. I mean, it's fine. It's cool. Whatever. Anyway, so chat has blown up. Jesus Christ, you two got. I saw Bacon jumped into the party. What'd you miss? Bacon, you missed everything. You missed the whole goddamn show, my man. I started at 10. Jeez, what I missed. But I got this cool new toy. Check this out. Where's it at? Uh, it's not updating over here. I got a cool new toy. Check it out. Comment, Bacon, or Emperor. There's Bacon. Boop, what I miss. You missed the whole. Basically, it was a monologue on cancel culture and how I do not think it's a real thing. It's mostly rich old guys who whine and cry about being held accountable for uh, their shitty behavior. And that's that. That's all that is. Cancel culture, most fin it exists. No, it doesn't. It does not. Cancel culture, the term at least, is a workshopped, refined, marketed phrase. It did not exist in popular vernacular before 2017. It is literally a marketing invention for those in power to scare people into thinking that they might be caught up in a woke mob who's going to come out with the pitchforks and torches and ruin your career because you said the N word when nobody was listening. But that's not how it works. That's not what happens. It's simply community standards. Community setting, establishing, and enforcing standards. That's all. Call it what you will. That's what it is. Uh, Now there is a problem. So my chat box over here with the widget is really, really small. I have to go through and find the chat boxes and read them. But maybe if I did this, made it bigger so I could see it. Yeah, that's better. So I can just kind of scroll down the chats and see. Um, Hello, John Tuna. Tuna. More tuna. And Joe Rogan. What? What I miss? Okay, I want to know how they tried to cancel tuna. How did they try to cancel? Wait, Gundam. Wait, Gundam? Is that is Gundam tuna? Whatever. Is that a TV show or is that you? I don't know who that is. And they did not. This the latest kerfluffle with Joe Rogan. All right, so let's talk about Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, noted misinformation specialist. Uh, Noted misinformation specialist and general meathead. Um, Pouting face. He comes and I don't even know what the latest was. First, he's using ivermectin. Well, wait. First, he's using this alpha brain nonsense. Then he's using ivermectin. Then he's telling people, apparently, what? Well, he was like casually dropping the N word. I don't know what the latest whole fucking thing was, but it, it goes back to the whole setting community standards thing. Um, I mean, first off, uh, Spotify is a shitty network for performers. They're a shitty network for performers. Absolutely shitty platform. You know, if unless you're a mainstream multi-listen type of artist, you know, if you're an indie, a smaller operator, a smaller artist, Spotify is just fucking terrible. You got to get like a trillion song plays to earn $50 or whatever it is. It's insane. Super duper bad. There's plenty of reasons to get out of Spotify. Not the least of which being that they spend, instead of spending money on real talent and artists, they prefer to spend money on bringing in people like Joe Rogan who will turn around and just perpetuate the dumbest and most nonsensical bullshit. It, and he's entertaining to a certain demographic, but it is well within artist rights to say, look, we don't want to be on the same platform as this guy. If y'all want to have him on your platform, we don't want to be on the platform with him. And that is communities establishing standards and enforcing those standards. And it should also be said that if artists want to forego the revenue that they would get from Spotify, they should be there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with artists saying, "Look, I want to go and I don't want my music being on that platform." They're welcome to do it. And Joe Rogan not being on Spotify doesn't take away Joe Rogan's career, doesn't take away Joe Rogan's reach, doesn't take away Joe Rogan's pod. He had a podcast before he was on Spotify. Everybody has a fucking podcast. I have a podcast. Joe Rogan can do a stupid show on YouTube. He can do a stupid show on Apple Tunes or Apple Music, whatever it is. He can do a stupid show on any of the podcast servers that are already out there. The fact that he has a contract with Spotify to be on Spotify's platform exclusively, that does not preclude him, should Spotify cut ties with him, that does not preclude him from continuing to have a podcast somewhere else, anywhere else. He had a podcast before he was on Spotify. So Steely Dan or whoever it was that said, I don't want to be on the same platform as this guy. Crosby, Stills, and Nash, Crosby, Nash, John Stills, whatever his name was, whoever it was. Well within his rights to simply say, "Look, I don't want to be associated with this guy. I don't want to. I don't want to be in the same room with him. I don't want to be in the same building. I don't." And that's what I was saying before. That you can. I'm gonna fucking be here till midnight, aren't I? That's fine. Uh, you don't necessarily want to be involved with every single community. There are some communities that will open their arms and embrace you in, and you might look around and go, "I don't want to be associated with these people. These people are a bunch of fucking lunatics." That's well within your rights to say, you know what? I'm going to take my drink and I'm going to go to the other table. I would do the exact same thing if I showed up at a bar, sat down with a bunch of strangers, said, "Hey guys, how's it going? What are y'all talking about?" They're like, "Oh, we're discussing the latest evidence of the flat Earth." I would take my cup. I'd say, "That sounds," and I would fuck off right out of there because I don't want to be associated with those lunatics. I would prefer to sit at a table and talk with people who aren't a bunch of fucking morons. That's my preference. Same goes, and I would lump those flat earthers in the same category as neo Nazis and fascists. You sit down to the table and they're like, "Yeah, we just wanted to talk about all the really good ideas that Mussolini had." I'd be like, out the door. um, you sit down at a table, you have your drink. So, what's the topic of conversation, gents? You look like a bunch of young, strapping, interesting individuals. What's the topic of conversation? They're like, "Oh, well, we were discussing how the Civil War really wasn't about slavery. It was really about," I wouldn't even wait for them to finish the fucking sentence. I would just take my glass and go walk right the fuck out the door. Because I don't want to be associated with that nonsense. I don't even want to be there. I don't want to, I don't give a shit if those people, I mean, actually, probably, to be completely honest, in the third situation, I would say, actually, your facts are entirely wrong. You need to look at the documentation. You're wrong. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's not a debatable point. You're repeating a lie. You're repeating a myth. You're wrong. I'm taking my glass and going elsewhere. Have a nice day. That's probably what I would say in that particular situation. But that's, neither here nor there at this point. Scrolling down, uh, Old Humble Tuna got canceled 20 years. How did you get canceled 20 years ago? You're on social media. You're on public. You're going to have to explain how you got canceled 20 years ago in the year 2000, 17 years before the term cancel culture came about. Whose plant did you jack off into? I need to know. Inquiring minds want to know. Let's see here. That's right, pouting face. Y'all need to up your chat game. All right, that's Nightbot. Who's next? John. Oh, that's. We don't want Nightbot. Come on. What is that? What is going on there? There we go. Coin Crew had. Oh, that's right. The Coin Crew did. They had a night at the shop. Um, in the stream giveaway. Oh, congratulations! One in the street giveaway. Congratulations. Um, why does a human's business have to be destroyed? Someone has to be held accountable for something. Why does a business have to be destroyed? Well, if the business is that individual, if that individual works at a large corporation, the business doesn't get destroyed. But if the business is that individual, if it's a sole proprietorship, that's the individual business. If the individual is the business and the two are unseverable, the explanation is that they live a life in violation of community standards. They can take their business into another community. There's absolutely no reason that they have to operate their business here. They can operate that business elsewhere. They can market that business to their people. Our people don't want their business around. We don't want their business. We don't want them in our community. And you can ask that question, but the way you should phrase this question is, why should old white men's businesses be ruined? Because old white men ruin businesses all the time for people that they found to be objectionable. The only reason, and I'm saying this in hyperbolic words because there's other reasons. It's an issue now because people who are out of power are using social media platforms to organize and focus their voice, to hold powerful people accountable for their behavior and their actions. And if you as an individual person, who is inseparable and unseverable from your business. If you can continue as an individual, as an objectionable individual, a person who's not welcome in the community, if you can continue to peddle your business to the community that welcomes you, if the neo-Nazis open their arms up and say, you're our people, come to us, then continue to operate your business. I mean, Jesus Christ, the My Pillow guy couldn't fucking sell a pillow at well, where the hell could he not sell a pillow? He couldn't sell it. If he went to the University of Houston, set up a kiosk at the University of Houston to sell his, whatever, $60 pillows, he wouldn't be able to sell a pillow. Not a single one. But if he takes his pillows and he sells his pillows on Fox, he's got his market. He's got his market of people. You could make the fair argument that through most of America, his business is not viable. But there is a distinct market where he can sell his pillows. There's a distinct market where a company that sells 5-pound bags of freeze-dried potatoes can have a thriving business. But for most of America, that is not true. Because most of America doesn't buy prepper food. Most of America doesn't do that. Most of America doesn't believe that the economy is going to crash and burn and you have to have gold as a reserve to be able to buy bullets or whatever other nonsensical bullshit there is. Most of America doesn't believe that. There's a market for that, but all of America is not that market. All communities aren't welcoming or are not receptive to that. All communities are not. And all communities are not obligated to accept people. They're just not, and people are not obligated to be accepted by every community. That's just not how the world works. And as I said before, I should not be. A 46-year-old married guy with 2 kids, should not be in a group, a study group with a bunch of 15-year-old high school girls, because I do not belong in that group. I do not belong in that community. I should not be in that community because A, I'm not in high school. I have nothing to study. And B, I'm an old dude. That's, there's whole like predator laws and stuff like that. Let's see here. What's next? Scrolling down as we continue. As we continue to scroll through the chats. And I am seeing good. Yeah, that's what I thought. Gundam was anime. Mechanized. It was the mechanized robots. The jets. They were the jets that turned into the robots. The jets that turned into the robots. That was the same style of toy that Skyscreamer was based on with the Transformers. And I think there was a lawsuit. I can't remember. Gundam and what was the other one? What was the other one called? Can't remember. It's on Amazon Prime. It is on Amazon Prime, and they also had motorcycles that turned into like exosuit robots, and then the whole like megalopolis city that was like this giant aircraft carrier that turned into this huge robot. Yeah, those are good times. That was, I believe, middle school for me. No, not Mech Warrior. Gundam, Robotech. Robotech, that's what I'm thinking of. Gundam and Robotech were basically the same show. They were very similar. They weren't identical, but they were very similar. Anyway, tried to cancel Joe Rogan, Spotify, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, no, I already talked about that. But again, people are completely within their rights to decide whether or not they should be associated with someone else. And you are fully within your right to say, look, if you want me to be on this platform, he's got to go. And then that's Spotify's choice at that point to decide whether he can stay or he can go. They have to then make that choice. I'm leaving. If you want me to stay, they got to go. Hell, I've done that in bars. I've done that in bars where there's been somebody there who I have a legitimate beef with because they were rapey, handsy type of people. And I've said, look, if you're gonna let this person in your bar, I'm not going to come to this bar. I'm not going to sponsor any events. I'm not going to have this shit. And they were like, yeah, you're right. Then they kicked the son of a bitch out because he needed to be kicked out. He was not welcome in that bar. He had to go find another open mic night. Sorry, piece of shit. Shit like that happens. There's and it happens more often than not. Well, no, I take that back. It happens more often than you think, but it doesn't happen like more often than not. It doesn't happen more often than it happens, but it happens more often than you think. And there are a lot of bars in the city of Houston where a lot of comics aren't allowed to go. They're not welcome in those establishments, and one of the reasons they're not welcome in those establishments is because the other comics said, if you let those guys in there, we're going to take our business elsewhere. So should that guy? So should the bar then say, look, y'all have to take your business so they lose 9 comics so that they can protect one? No, they should absolutely let the community make the choice. And if the community decides, look, this is the choice that we're going to be making, you bar owner, get rid of this guy, or you bar owner, you get rid of the rest of us. And Spotify made their choice. They stood with Joe Rogan, which, good or bad, I don't really care. Spotify is a shitty platform either way. They stood with Joe Rogan. They kept around. Netflix did the same thing with Dave Chappelle. I just called him Chappelle. With Netflix did the same thing with Dave Chappelle. They were producing shows. They were paying for the production of his shows. And then he goes off and does his transgender rant joke, whatever. I don't even remember what the fucking joke was, but like Netflix said, we're an open door. Like we're an open forum, we're an open door. We're going to have them in, and if artists and performers and other production companies wanted to say, look, we're not going to have our shows on Netflix because, but nobody said that. Partly because Netflix is a better platform than Spotify, body of work type of thing. They're a much better platform. And also partly because Dave Chappelle, well, I mean, we know who Dave Chappelle is. Turns out, wow, I don't know. I don't know. There's a whole body of work behind Dave Chappelle too. He's a very mercurial character. But those are two very similar situations with two very different outcomes, where Spotify chose to stand with Joe Rogan, and it cost them a lot of the performers that were on their platform, partly because they're not a platform that's very valuable to the performers. On the other hand, Netflix stood with their artists that they had produced and funded, and their artist, nobody left the platform. Partly because Netflix is a better platform for their artists, but also a good chunk of the difference between those two things is the difference between Joe Rogan and Dave Chappelle, and their body of work. Their body of work speaks for itself between those two guys. I don't have to. I don't have to defend or tear down either of them because their body of work speaks for itself. Um, Howard Stern is. God damn, I haven't heard that name. Uh, Howard Stern is another. That's a whole another topic. But then there was the one dude. There was the other dude who was like another shock jock back in the 1990s, late 1990s, called the uh, basketball team for Purdue, I think, the women's basketball team for Purdue, a bunch of, and I quote, Don Imus. That's the name I'm thinking of. Called, I think it was Purdue after they won the national championship, called the Purdue women's basketball team a bunch of, and I quote, nappy headed hoes. And he was bounced off the, see, back in the late 80s and 90s and late 90s, there was a whole process for when you when you said racially insensitive things, you basically went before Jesse Jackson and apologized and made a donation to the Rainbow Push Coalition, and then they vouched for you and they said, "Oh, he's really not that bad of a guy," and then you might have lost your job, but you get another job, and then everything was fine. Or who's the other guy who works for MSNBC now? He has a really big head and a really skinny body. Uh, shit. It'll come to me later. Y'all probably know who he is. It'll come to me later. Um, but that was the other guy. You would either you go to one of those guys. You make your apologies, you write your check, and everything will be fine. But yeah, that's basically what Don Imus did. He lost his job, I think, with CBS. CBS dropped him as an affiliate. Lost his job with the radio station, and then yeah, I mean, he was like 1,000 years old. He may not be working anymore, but I think whatever. He lost that job. He went and got another one. So one community kicked him out, another community picked him up. Not, horrible. Uh, but of all the things that I remember Don Imus for, that's the first one. I remembered that event before I remembered his name, uh, which is probably appropriate. Um, but yeah, Howard Stern's nother a whole nother category. Howard Stern is, in a lot of cases, what these other radio guys wish they could be. Howard Stern is what Joe Rogan wishes he could be. Um, Somebody who can literally get away with doing and saying anything. That dude, that's a whole nother topic. And see, here's the thing. I'm so like he was a thing before he went to Sirius XM radio. He was a thing. And then once he went to Sirius XM, he was no longer a thing because nobody had Sirius XM radio. He went to that platform as one of their uh, primary talents, and then much the same way that Joe Rogan has gone to Spotify as a primary talent. But he had his own channel, and he was like, he's like people are going to get subscriptions based on who I am. I think he ended up owning part of that. I think he ended up owning because at the time it wasn't Sirius XM. At the time, I think it was just. I think he went to XM Radio and got a channel, and then XM bought Sirius, and it became Sirius XM. I think. Can't remember. Uh, yeah, that's been fucking forever ago. We might as well be talking about Laurel and Hardy. Good God. On to the other stuff. You could. What are you doing? Yeah. Is ostracization is it's the same. It's what ostracization is what was before a marketing group came up with the term cancel culture to scare Republican voters. It has been a thing since prehistory. For as long as there's been communities, there's been community standards. And for most of history, it was the people in power handing down the punishments for people stepping outside of community standards. And that's the ironic thing is the people who are crying about cancel culture have been the people who were applying the rules of cancel culture for centuries. I mean, you ask Colin Kaepernick about cancel culture, but they don't call it cancel culture. They don't call what they did to him cancel culture, even though that's what they did. That's straight up what they did to him. They don't call burning down Greenville and blowing up an entire town 100 years ago canceling people. They just called it, giving them darkies what they deserved. They don't call lynches canceling. It was just, a community event and a barbecue. That's what they did. But it's the same fucking thing. It's just far more violent and people actually died. People actually, like hundreds and hundreds of people actually died. You want to talk about losing your livelihood? That's what that was. They fucking burn witches at the stake in the 1600s. me about fucking cancel culture. The only reason why it became an issue, not the only reason, but when it became an issue was when people who were not in power were choosing to make people who were in power be held accountable for their shitty behavior. And that's, it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. I think that's how that works. That's the proper phrase. Because the goose is an individual, the gander is the group. It's good for the one, it's good for them all. That's not a good application of that phrase. I'll think about that. I'll come up with a better phrase. Turnabout's fair play. There you go. That's the right phrase. Turnabout's fair play. Communities should absolutely be allowed to establish standards. And if you don't like it, don't be a shitty person. Because shitty people are the ones that get caught up in this stuff. And mobs can go, God. Richard Jewell is an example of, well, no, that's a really bad example. But it's the idea. Like he was innocent. He was accused of a crime and fully innocent of the crime that he was accused of doing. So it's not analogous. It's not a fair analogy. Who am I thinking of? That he was accused of a thing, and then he said, "Yeah, I didn't do that," and it just kind of blew over. I'm thinking of a dude. Who am I thinking of? I'm thinking of a guy. He was accused of the thing, and he said, "Look, I didn't do it. This is nonsense. I didn't do it. This is silly. It's nonsense, and my body of work speaks for itself. I didn't do it. Ask anybody. This isn't even something that's within my character. I'm not buying it." I mean, shit, it happened to my son. He was 10 years old or so. We were at the distillery. He was down, uh, he was playing around in the parking lot because he was bored and I was doing some work. And he was like kicking around some rocks with his feet and doing some stuff. And this guy drives past in his truck and he comes back and he pulls up into the parking garage or the parking lot of the distillery. And he walks into my shop and he says, your son's over there kicking rocks at trucks and cars as they drive by. I'm like, really? That doesn't sound like something he would do. And I called my son and said, "Son, were you kicking rocks at cars as you were driving by?" He's like, "No." I was like, that doesn't sound like something my son would do. He's like, "Are you calling me a liar?" I'm like, "Well, I mean, are you lying?" Because I wasn't calling you a liar. Are you lying? Because I'm just saying that's not something that my son would do. But if it'll make you feel better, I'll apologize on his behalf, and then you can just leave. How's that sound? He's like, "No, your son needs to apologize." I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to make him apologize. It's just going to be an empty apology, and it's not going to mean anything." He's like, "Well, your son needs to apologize for kicking rocks." I'm like, "Did he kick rocks at your car? Son, did you?" "No." Look, dude, I don't know what to tell you. But, if it'll just make you go away, like, son, I need you just to say the words. But you and I both know you didn't do this. And he said the words. I'm like, "Are you happy now?" And the guy's like, "Okay, I'm fine." I'm like, "Okay, then get out. Don't come back to my distillery. That'll be fine. We'll be cool. You just don't come back." Um, and that was, I mean, it was falsely accused of something he didn't do, and that was fine. And in order to make the whole situation go away, like, "Sir, if you are offended by the behavior of my son, then I'm sorry that you were offended." The non-apology apology, the bullshit fake apology that happens all the time when people are accused of something that they did or did not do. But there was another dude that I'm trying to think of where he was accused of a particularly heinous act. The Duke lacrosse team. That's the dude that I'm thinking of. The whole Duke lacrosse team was accused of raping a stripper at some house party that they had or something like that. And they're like, this, I mean, yeah, a lacrosse team at Duke, but like we didn't fucking do this. And the whole fucking weight of the world came down on these guys. And they maintained their innocence. They're like, we didn't do it. We didn't fucking do it. Like, this is what happened. She came and she freaked out, and then, they laid out the story. They're like, this is what happened, but we didn't do what she said we did. And they lost their scholarships, they got kicked off the team, they had to leave Duke, they went to another Ivy League school. And then it turns out, a year later after they go to the other school, like they were completely exonerated. Um, we don't even know their names anymore. I could barely even remember the details I was thinking of a guy. It wasn't a guy, it was like six guys. They were not they were not guilty. They stuck by their story. They went through a thing. It was an ordeal for, 6 months or whatever. But for every time an innocent person gets accused and let off the hook, guilty people also get accused and let off the hook. Like that shitbird swimmer who raped a girl behind a dumpster and was given a slap on the wrist because, his future might be impacted by having to go to jail for raping somebody. For every innocent person that gets accused, guilty people get let off the hook. Probably 5 guilty people get let off the hook. Um, so I would much rather innocent people get accused and exonerated than guilty people get accused and excused. Uh, Actually, I would much rather innocent people not be accused at all, and I would much rather guilty people be held accountable for their actions. But cast a wide net. Sometimes you catch a dolphin. I mean, hell, I had a coworker when I was, God, this was 98, 99. She was listening to her headphones. Just an awful fucking person. An absolute awful fucking person. I called her. Her name was Mary. I called her, Mary, hey, I got a question for you. I went up and tapped her on the shoulder. Hey, Mary. She turned around. She was startled, scared the piss out of her because she had her headphones on. She wasn't supposed to have her headphones on. But because she was the receptionist, administrative assistant, basically the receptionist. And she was supposed to have her headphones on because she couldn't hear clients coming into the building. Tap her on her shoulder. Hey, Mary, I need to get this thing done. So because I tapped her on her shoulder, she accused me of being handsy. And of course, I had worked there at that point for probably 5 years. And then she goes to HR, tells HR, Deb, the HR director, calls me in. Like, Mary accused you of being handsy. I'm like, that's the most preposterous, ridiculous, absurd thing I've ever heard. And it's also the most preposterous, ridiculous, absurd thing you've ever heard. I don't even think I should respond to this with any sincerity. She's like, well, like for paperwork purposes, we have to get a written statement. I'm like, this is fucking stupid. And I wrote that this is stupid in the statement. And yeah, it blows over like that. When you're not a dirtbag, it turns out that shit like that just blows over like that. And it also turns out that like 2 months later, she was shit canned because she wasn't doing her job. But that's fine. It's fine. It all worked out well for everybody. Which is why, again, I maintain it's not a real thing. And if you're not a dirtbag, you don't have to worry about running afoul of community standards because you're not a dirtbag and your body speaks for itself. You may overstep a boundary here or there and say uh, and make a joke that is not funny and definitely insensitive. Like when I was joking about what's her name, Sally Jesse Raphael. Do y'all even know who Sally Jesse Raphael is? God damn, that's a name from a million years ago. But anyway, uh, man-hating dyke is the words that I used. Um, sure, you can leave. You absolutely can force someone to leave. I've already talked about that. You can absolutely force someone to leave. Or you can make somebody choose. You can 100% make somebody choose. Give them an ultimatum. Him or me. Him or me. Absolutely make them choose. You can absolutely make them choose him or me and him 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 and him. It's your choice. You can cast your lot with this person or cast your lot with the other dozen or so people. You can absolutely throw down the gauntlet and make that ultimatum. Um, and most of the time, they'll make the decision that's in their best interest, their own best interest. If Joe Rogan brings in more revenue than whoever, Steely Dan or Crosby Nash or whoever it was, then they'll be like, you know what? I mean, we're sticking with this guy. You got to go. Bye. We appreciate it. Thanks for hanging around. Um, but you, you throw out the seeds. You make your bed and then you lay in it. That's how it is. That's how it works. You choose the dogs you sleep with, and in that way you can't choose which fleas you get, but you choose the dogs you sleep with. And sometimes when you sleep with certain dogs, you get certain fleas. And I think, you know, Spotify says we want this audience. We want Joe Rogan's fleas. That's what they said. That's what they're getting. They get the people who listen to Joe Rogan, the young 20-something male audience that Joe Rogan brings. That's who they wanted, and they chose that. And I think they also chose based on the fact that Joe Rogan's probably going to bring more subscribers and listeners over the next 10 years than whoever it was that left will be bringing in over the next 10 years. And that's the matrix that the decision matrix that they had. And platforms, people who participate in a platform can say the same thing for people like Alex Jones or Milo Zanafra, blah blah blah, whatever his name was, or Glenn Beck, or any of these other nonsense peddlers like Tucker Carlson. They can sit there and be like, if you want to have him, if you're gonna if you're gonna spend a significant amount of money to bring them on your platform, I don't want to have anything to do with it. I'm out. And Spotify can make that decision. Say, you know what, you're right. I'm out too. Bye. I mean, I've done that. There was a show that was inviting me to be a sponsor and advertise on their show. They were trying to get me to spend money to advertise on their show on a particular channel, uh, a digital channel and a broadcast channel here locally in the city of Houston. There was a show that was trying to get me to spend advertising money on that show. So I watched the show. And I watched the show and I looked at the other vendors, the other commercials on the show, and I'm like, I don't want to be associated with any of these lunatics. Um, and I told them, like, I can't justify spending money to advertise on the show if you've got, this company, and this company advertising on your show as well. Like, the content of the show wasn't like great. It was like dumb nonsense, like legit dumb nonsense. But like the advertisers on the show, I found the fellow advertisers that I would be advertising with objectionable, and I told them, like, I can't do this. You'll have to get rid of this guy and this guy for me to come on the show, and I'm fucking nobody. And they said, okay, well then thanks for your lack of interest. If it changes, give us a call. And that was fine. We parted ways. Um, and we will continue to have our ways parted. I won't be advertising on that show. I'm not going to tell you what the channel is. We did a show on that. We did sponsor a show on that channel when the Humble Rodeo was broadcast on that channel. I pulled out of my sponsorship the next year, and then they pulled out of the broadcast that same year because my sponsorship was apparently what was keeping them on as a broadcaster, but or helping to pay for their operation or something like that. But I chose to no longer be associated with them, and I told them I'm not going to continue to be associated with you as long as you have these people on. And they could have chosen, if I was a bigger advertiser, if I was a larger advertiser, like a big fat contract, like something like Jim Beam, if I was dropping a significant amount of money, I absolutely could have told them, look, if you want me on as an advertiser, if you want these commas, you need to get rid of those guys because those guys are full of shit. They could have absolutely dropped those advertisers, but they chose not to because I'm nobody. I'm a small fry nobody. Um, but again, I choose. We all get to choose the communities with whom we participate and in which we participate. And if we want to, if they wanted me to be a vendor on their show, they would have had to make their executive decision of whether or not they wanted to be associated with the other types of vendors that they had on their show. Um, and I guess the best way to describe this would be if you like listen to AM radio and you listen to the well, not even AM radio. You know, you watch Hulu and you watch the ads on Hulu. It's the same fucking ads again and again and again and again. It's Geico, it's uh it's mostly Geico, and it's like three advertisers again and again and again and again and again and again. It's those three advertisers, and you can expect that on Hulu. Like you turn on a Hulu show, you watch the ads, guarantee it's going to be Geico and Ford and something else, whatever, whoever it is, guarantee it every time. You watch Hannity or Tucker or whatever on Fox, guarantee you're going to get the pillow guy, you're going to get uh, uh, gold brokerage, and you're going to get shit. I can't even remember what the other ones are. You guarantee you're going to get those guys. These advertisers were like that, except not as reputable. I think that's not and not even as reputable. Not as reputable is not even the right way to go. They were like one of the companies was literally owned by one of the companies was literally owned by an organizer of a neo-Nazi militia. Literally. I'm not being hyperbolic at all. I'm not like saying he just was bald. You can be bald and not be a neo-Nazi. I mean, I'm talking like if the company was registered to the name of a guy, and if you looked up that guy was the founder of a neo-Nazi militia group. To which I said, and it was like a couple other companies that were like in the same genre of product. And I told him, I'm not going to advertise on a show next to these people. Like your nonsense, your silly, dumb nonsense, whatever, fine. I'm not going to advertise on a show next to these people. And they said, okay. But again, flip side, if I'd have been a bigger vendor, if I were looking to advertise a larger spot, I absolutely could have told them, look, this is how it's going to be. If you want me to come on this show, those guys got to go because I'm not going to have my brand associated with those guys. And if it costs me more to advertise with you, if your market is valuable enough to me, if your market is valuable enough to me to get me to spend the money, I'll happily pay you a little bit extra to kick them the fuck out. And then you go find some reputable vendors to advertise next to me. Absolutely well within my power because money talks. But I was not in a position to be able to do that. I was not, and they made their executive decision, and their executive decision was just fine. They threw in their lot with the neo-Nazis, and that's fine. Let them do it. But it is something, the traditional American golden rule: he with the gold makes the rules. And Spotify made the decision in the case of Joe Rogan. Spotify makes the decision that they want the market that comes with Joe Rogan more than they want the market that comes with Crosby, Stills, and Nash, or whoever it was that, Barry Manilow and Gwen Stefani, or whoever it was that bailed on Spotify. I don't know. They wanted that market that came with Joe Rogan. And that's the decision they made, and that's fine for them to make. If another podcaster came on, if Spotify's like, we want your market too, and they're trying to get, I don't know, Sarah Silverman or some other podcaster to come on the Spotify network, and they said, you know what, we'll be happy to come on your network, but we're not going to come on the same network as that guy. That would be completely within their realm to decide not to associate themselves with Spotify if Spotify is going to continue to associate themselves with somebody that they find to be demonstrably objectionable. For my, for what it's worth, I don't give a shit. I find Spotify to be objectionable for 1,000 other better reasons. Uh, but I know enough artists that can tell me exactly how shitty Spotify is. It's like it's something like 10,000 downloads, 10,000 listens to a song for the artist to get a penny. I think it's something like that ratio. It's a ridiculous amount of streams that needs for the artist to actually get paid anything. Um, that's why, in my book, they're an objectionable platform. But who they have, every platform is going to have, or every dog is going to have fleas, and nobody wants to get those fleas. You can't vet everybody. You invest in the S&P 500, you could be investing in companies that do horrible things. Nobody's a saint. Nobody, even saints aren't saints. Nobody's perfect. Nobody lives a spotless life. But everybody has the right to establish, every community has a right to establish standards. And within every set of standards, there's certain deal breakers and certain compromisable principles. It's not, so much a standard as it is a guideline, but in other cases, it's an absolute standard. If, you know, if you, um, I mean, if you are a sexual predator, you're not going to be a babysitter in my house. That is a deal breaker. That is an absolute deal breaker. I don't care if you were 19 and she was 16. If you are well, actually, no. That's the compromisable situation. If you were 19 and she was 16 and you are registered as a sex offender and you've been registered as a sex offender for, whatever the 5 years that you're required to be registered as a sex offender, that is entirely different than when you're 45 and showing up on To Catch a Predator with Chris Hansen because you were chatting for 2 weeks with a 13-year-old girl. Uh, there is no compromise in that second situation. You had ample opportunity to change your mind and make a better decision, and you instead continued to go down the path. Every chance you got, continued to go down the path. But I don't think that there's a man among us who didn't graduate high school and as a freshman in college went back to high school and dated somebody. So I don't think there's a man among us who wasn't 18 or 19 and dated a 16 or 17 or 15-year-old, which technically makes you a sexual predator because you were dating an underage girl. And if y'all had sex, that makes you a statutory rapist at some point in your life. But actually, I don't think dating is illegal. I think it's just the sex. I don't know. I've never had to look into the law, so I don't know. That's one of the benefits of not being a dirtbag is you don't have to look into laws to see if what you're doing is illegal because you just pretty much assume you're not doing anything that's egregiously illegal. Chances are you're breaking laws on a fairly regular basis. Who among us doesn't speed? But for the most part, you don't have to when you're swiping right on Tinder, you don't have to be all like, gee, does this fall within the guidelines of legal relationship? Because you're not a dirtbag. It doesn't matter. That's a fun little tangent in the sideline. Let's scroll down more chat because time has no meaning. It's after midnight. Fuck it. I am an hour past the time I had intended to go to bed. Russian. We went to a bar in Rio, and a bunch of Russian sub guys came in. Ooh, like I assume submarine and not sub like they are submissives. Squids. We all got along. No problem. What was that? But that was 17. Oh, the Russian sub guys, 1977. I gotcha. Uh, dude, we got a new face in chat. AC2RM1. Cheers. Sorry, I'm really behind with chat. Cheers to chat. Um, no, you got canceled. I did not get canceled. I've never been canceled. Sorry, kid, because it's not a thing. Um, my cousin chose to disassociate herself from me, and it was best for both of us, to be quite honest. Because I don't have time for misspelled rants that are in all caps and random non sequiturs. Um, port being in port on an aircraft. I thought you said being in porn on an aircraft carrier. That would have been weird. Having a rep. So okay, so you were on an aircraft carrier in port, and then the Russian sub guys came in the same harbor. I gotcha. I gotcha. Russian submariners. Well, what was that? John Jacobs. At least bring vodka. I doubt they brought their own vodka. Not going to the bar. F-14 Tomcats, which flew, drank beer and vodka with them. Of course you did. Holy shit! I'm way behind on chat, guys. I get to talking. Um, Sorry about that. Hour four. Another New York Outcast. Cheers. The pillows aren't bad. Okay, so my pillow guys' pillows aren't bad. That is good to know. That is good to know. I did. I have very comfortable pillows. I haven't been in the market for a new pillow in a couple of years, so I have no idea. Um, I just know the only thing I know about that guy is that he apparently has some evidence that he's not showing anybody about stuff that went on in Arizona. And when he did show the evidence that he did have, whatever other evidence that he had, when he did show it, it was nonsense. So I mean, whatever. He could sell his shitty pillows wherever he wants to, or very good pillows wherever he wants to sell them. I don't care. It makes no difference to me. Um, don't have to actively. Well, see, that's just the thing. They can take their business and go wherever they want. They can sell their stuff to whatever community they want to sell it to. It's not actively destroying the business. It's just saying that this community doesn't want their business here. I mean, like I said before, Louis C.K. is still doing comedy. He's just not doing comedy in the Verizon Center in downtown Houston. He's not doing arena shows in the Summit or where he's not doing comedy on the scale he used to be doing it. He's doing comedy. He's still playing bars and clubs. He's just not playing the giant venues the way he used to be playing. He still has a viable business. He's just not a national headliner like he used to be. He's paying the price for his behavior, paying the price for his actions, and that's how it should be. You and if he does find a market, if he does find a community that will put him up in a theater and that will fill in the theater, more power to him. He can go do his act among people who have no problem listening to the awkward, edgy comedy of a guy who jacks off into plants when other people are in the room watching. I mean, if that's what he wants to do, that's his thing. Fine. Um, sure, let him do it. I don't care. They can fill in the theaters however they want to. If he can find the market to do it, let him find the market to do it. But he's not. He's not finding the broad market that he otherwise would have found, or that he used to find. Face with steam from. Dude, are you doing the thing where instead of doing the emoji, you just describe the emoji? That's annoying. It's funny. Yes, Robotech. That okay. God damn, I am way behind in chat, and I am sorry. Uh-huh. Tomcats. Tomcats were cool jets. Those sweep wing jets. Um, in that case, I was more valuable as old on. Yeah, and that's exactly what I was saying. Joe Rogan is perfectly valuable to Spotify as who he is. He brings the market that he wants to bring, and or he brings the market that they want him to bring, and they would rather have that market that he brings than the market that they lose from whoever that they lose, and that's fine. And that's what I told the guys at the TV station. I'm like, look, I'm perfectly happy to advertise on the show. I just don't want to be associated with these other channels or with these other products and these other people. I don't want to be associated with them. You're perfectly happy bringing in the market you're bringing in. I would be perfectly happy selling to the people that you're bringing in, but I don't want to be standing in the same room as those other guys. So there's ways to do it where I can reach that same market that they reach without standing in a room with literal neo Nazis. And that's perfectly fair. That's absolutely perfectly fair. It would have been perfectly within their rights to say, you know what, we want you and not them. But it was also perfectly within their rights to say we want them and not you. That was a community that I did not want to be a part of. And as such, I chose to not be a part of that community. Um, and the flip side is, if they wanted me to be a part of their community, they would have had to make certain changes. They didn't want to make those changes, so they didn't want me to be a part of their community. And that's fine. That's within their rights. It's within their rights, just as it's within my rights to associate with them or not associate with them. And that is basically that's basically the issue. When people crying and whining about cancel culture, it's because they want to say stuff that people don't want to hear them say. Um, they want to spread a message that people don't want that message spread, that people don't want to be spread in their community. And when a group of students gets up and says, look, we don't want that guy spreading his lies and bullshit, and then the guy spreading the lies and bullshit say, well, that's an infringement of my free speech. It's not. It's simply a community setting the standard saying, we don't want your lies and bullshit. Take your lies and bullshit and go somewhere else. The same way that I say, I don't want to be associated with your neo Nazis, and they can say, we prefer to be associated with neo Nazis, take your whiskey somewhere else. And I say, fine, I'll take my whiskey elsewhere. I did not want to be a part of that community. And that community didn't want me to be a part of them, and that's fine. And in the case of, you know, a group of students standing up and saying, we don't want your lies and bullshit, they should be allowed to say, we don't want your lies and bullshit. And, if you want to speak in our community, you should not speak lies and bullshit. That's completely fair and completely within their rights. And there's community standards on social media as well, where if you're propagating false information, that false information can be culled and trimmed. And that's a whole, oh my God, that's a whole nother issue. That section, what is it? Section 214 of the uh, digital media law from like 1994, like 1996 or whatever it was. The whole situation was designed so that bulletin board systems that were literally news aggregators or information aggregators, and literally all they did was put up an open forum so that people could put line after line after line after line after line of stories and texts and whatever it was. And you as a user would log on, and there'd be, in whatever forum you were a member of, 100 lines that were added in since the last time you logged in. And there wasn't any filtering, there wasn't any sifting. You literally just got whatever it was that was put in there. And those bulletin board systems were saying, oh, we can't be held liable for what other people are posting to the bulletin board. I mean, it's a very literally like a cork board at a Starbucks. People are putting up their band flyers and whatever on the cork board. They can't be held liable for what random people come to the Starbucks and post on the wall. They can't be held liable for that because they're not the editor, as opposed to a place like ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, PBS, CNN, Fox, whoever it is, they have editorial capacity to trim and validate content before it goes out. These bulletin board systems didn't have that capability, they didn't have that access. So when you have online news aggregators and the bulletin board systems and AOL and places like that, they were just like they were aggregators that they would just bring it in and like slot it in the order that they received it. They couldn't be held liable, and they argued that we shouldn't be held liable. But social media today is not like that. Social media today, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, they cultivate and curate a series, even even news organizations uh, they cultivate and curate a an experience for you personally. So the front page that you look at when you look at CNN.com is not the front page I look at when I look at CNN.com. It's not the front page that, when you look at Fox and I look at Fox, we look at different stories with different headlines. They A/B test all this shit. It'll be similar. Maybe their headlines will be the same, but like the subsequent stories, they may not necessarily be the same. It's certainly that way for Twitter. It's certainly that way for YouTube. It's certainly that way for Instagram and Facebook. So and this was stark and real when I was doing my research for the flat Earth theory show and the math of the flat Earth or the round Earth math shows. If you look up stuff like that, YouTube looks at your search and they go, "Oh, you like this? Here's some more like that," and they steer you down this other path. So they absolutely 100% use these algorithms as editorial um, or as an editorial board, not necessarily managing the content, but definitely managing the content that you see. So they don't hold the uh, editorial position over the content specifically, but they absolutely hold a curatorial position over the content that you get to see because they manage and curate this experience for you. So the laws that are applicable today are not the same as the laws. Well, the laws that are applicable today were written 25 years ago and are very much outdated to the point that social media companies should 100% be held at least, I won't say 100%, they should be held at least partially liable for the stuff that you're seeing. So they absolutely positively should take some role in ensuring that what is on their platform is at the very least factually accurate, even if it's interpretively wrong. Because two people can look at the same thing. They can be two blind people can put their hand on an elephant and describe it in vastly different ways. Whether they're putting their hand on the side of the elephant versus the trunk of the elephant, those two things feel very, very, very differently. Um, but to that extent, they absolutely should have some kind of responsibility to ensure that what's on their platform is at the very least factual. And if Ted Cruz gets upset because the stuff that he posts gets fact checked and proved to be wrong, then Ted Cruz should maybe not post things that are counterfactual and wrong. Maybe. Just a thought. Maybe if you get upset because the shit that you post is bullshit and lies, maybe the shit you post should not be bullshit and lies rather than getting upset because you're not allowed to post bullshit and lies. And no, that's not a First Amendment thing because last time I checked, Twitter was not an extension of the federal government nor a branch of Congress or the executive. Ted Cruz can absolutely take his bullshit and lies and put it on his own website. He's not obligated. He doesn't have a right to post it on Twitter, and Twitter's not obligated to allow him to post it, especially if the baseline community standard is what you post should be factual, or at least not uh, intentionally unfactual. So there you go. There's that. There's definitely that. But that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother show. We should probably get into that one day. The almighty algorithms. Lisa only comes on Thursday nights. Um, Howard Stern thinks everyone should get the jab. Well, Howard Stern's not completely wrong about some things. Howard Stern's an interesting guy. Yo, you heard that particular I'm a show. Did I get the school right? Was it Purdue? Was it the Purdue Boilermakers? I think I got the. Maybe it was Villanova. I can't remember. I can't remember the name of the school. I just remember the phrase that he used, um, and it was so ridiculous because he wouldn't have said that about the dudes. He didn't say that about the dudes. He said it only about the girls, and it was just so gross. Um, yeah, and that's true. Imus did. He did a lot of good work. Uh, the body of work that he had behind him, he was he wasn't a two-dimensional character. He was a very deep three-dimensional character. But also, Al Capone ran soup kitchens, so it's not like, people are complex animals. You can be a dirtbag and do good work and still be a dirtbag. Um, and I'm pretty sure he got a job after he got bounced out of CBS because he paid, he made his repentance remarks and he paid his check and he did all the thing. He did the whole song and dance you were supposed to do in the 90s. And that was and guys, I'm not even joking about that. If you were South Park did a show. South Park did a show. It was uh it was a Wheel of Fortune show, and Randy was the contestant, and the clue was these people are annoying, and it goes up to the board and it says in blank GG blank R, and of course Randy says exactly what you think Randy would say, but the response, and everybody gasps. The correct answer was naggers, NAGGER, don't at me. Um, and like the whole episode was Randy paying his pittances to Al Franken. That's the name. I told you I'd think of the name. Al Franken and Jesse Jackson, and writing the check and doing the apologies and all this stuff. That was the whole fucking show about how he could, the whole repentance theater uh, of people in the 90s and in the late 80s and 90s, and how they, you make your donation to the Rainbow Push Coalition, and then Jesse Jackson speaks on your behalf, and there's a whole firestorm, but then it all shuts down and it all goes away. Of course, there wasn't social media and all that other crap, and stuff ends up being forgotten. But go YouTube, look up Randy, South Park, um, Naggers, NAGGER. Um, and then there was that one radio, the Jim Rome show, the one episode of the Jim Rome show where he was interviewing Joe Montana, and of course I pictured Joe Montana in his robe, sitting in a lounge chair by the pool with a drink in his hand, talking on the phone. It's Joe Montana, so it's like a big, like giant, wireless, uh, cordless phone, like what we used to have. And Jim Rome's talking to him, and this is after I think Ray Rice had beat his girlfriend up or killed somebody. I can't remember what the story was with Ray Rice. But he asks Joe fucking Montana, like one of the best guys on the planet, asks Joe Montana, like, he says, has the NFL had too many black guys in it? Is this a problem for the NFL? And Joe Montana says, I think that the NFL, and this is exactly like very much like how he answered it. I think the NFL, it's a very big organization that does. They have a lot of people in the organization. There's a lot of players in the NFL, and you can't judge all of the players based on just the one. But I mean, yeah, we've had some issues, but I think for the most part we all get along, which doesn't make any sense really when the question was, with in relation to Ray Rice, if the NFL has had too many black guys tarnishing its reputation, if the players getting along, that's not really the issue. And Rome goes, all right, thanks, Joe. We're going to cut to commercial. We'll come back for another segment. We'll be back. And then he does his commercials. And then he comes back and he apologizes profusely to He starts off apologizing profusely to Joe Montana. And he says, I don't think you understood the question right. And I apologize for not being clear with the question. Joe, the question was, are there too many black eyes for the NFL, not black guys? Um, and I was laughing my ass off because I had figured it out during the commercial, and they joked about it, they laughed about it, and then to this day, if you listen to the Jim Rome show, when he says black eyes. He enunciates that very black eyes. He enunciates it very clearly because it's still an ongoing joke, and we're talking like 20 something years ago when Jim Rome was still a thing. Um, he still has his show in major markets, but it is much diminished than where it was before. But that, that I don't know why I went on to that. Why did I get into that? Anyway, but I think probably I was thinking about that because if Joe Montana wasn't the decent guy that Joe Montana is, that question could have totally derailed Joe Montana's career. Um, but that's an example of the whole like body of work argument. You're not People are very complex and very uh, our body of work is a deep, complex body of work, and we are deep, complex creatures and have deep, complex social interactions that span across communities and interact with several communities. And we as a people should be very slow and prudent when it comes to responding to violations of community standards, but we also should be very, very rigorous in enforcing those red lines to make sure that people who are bad actors do not result in multiple black guys for our communities. See what I did there? Um, Black eyes for the community, because communities have identities, and our communities should vehemently defend those identities. We shouldn't be so closed off and so narrow that uh, we can't continue to grow and evolve and interact with others, but we also can't be so permissive so that we don't have any standards whatsoever. We should have certain baseline standards. We should absolutely have certain baseline standards, ideally standards of on some level of inclusivity, and on some level cooperation, uh, and on some level tolerance. But there should also be certain things that we don't tolerate, and it's not negotiable. It's not negotiable at all. Like tolerating intolerance, which is paradoxical to say the very least. Shouldn't tolerate that shit. We absolutely shouldn't, because that closes off interaction, closes off communities, and closes off um, um, opportunities to grow and learn from one another. But at the same time, that doesn't mean uh, that just so that I could learn from the Klan, I should let the Grand Dragon come in and talk to our church on Sundays. Fuck that. I don't want that guy coming into my fucking church. I don't want that guy coming into my schools. I don't want that guy coming into my anything. Get the fuck out. Stay the fuck out. Don't come back. I don't want to be associated with you people. Go away. Bye. Shoot. And again, well within our rights to do that. It should 100% be within our rights to do that. We should be freely allowed to associate with people that we want to associate with, and not be forced to associate with people we don't want to associate with. And anything other than that, um, if enough of the people in my community don't want somebody speaking to our community, then you're not welcome to speak here. But if enough people want somebody to speak there, then yeah, I'll stay home and let this other asshole come and speak his bullshit and lies, and that's fine. The rest of those of us who want to stay home will stay home. Um, but there you go. Let's go on. Scroll further down. I'm almost caught up with chat, believe it or not. Um, let me see. Hang on. Don't remember that broadcast, but wasn't Imus sort of led into? I don't remember. I don't remember the details. It's been forever. Um, and our guys here in Houston were Stevens and Pruitt, and they were kind of the same spirit of show as Don Imus and Howard Stern and those guys. But Um, bunch of crazy, yeah, yeah. 3 million bison at one time. What the fuck? That's a non sequitur. I was not expecting to see that comment. To the government wanted to starve the Indians. Yes. Delicious land bison. Okay. Nightbot. Thank you, Nightbot. I'm trying to equate. No, I'm not trying to equate cancel culture with racism at all. I am equating cancel culture with racism because old school cancel culture, well, I should probably finish reading the comment. Old school cancel culture was racism. Absolutely 100% was racism. A bunch of old fuckers saying black guys can't eat at this counter. You can't go to this school. You can't drink out of that water fountain. You can't. So that is 100% cancel culture. 100%. They can't go swimming in our swimming pools. If they're going to swim in our swimming pools, we're going to take our kids out and build our own pools. The whole home swimming pool industry was built because white people didn't want to swim in pools with black kids. 100%. 100%. Absolutely, racism and cancel culture are the same thing. The difference is modern cancel culture, the term cancel culture was applied specifically to people holding the powerful accountable. But in the 50s and 60s and before that, it was powerful people forcing accountability and forcing community standards on the weaker people. That's the difference today. That's why the people who are freaking out about cancel culture are freaking out about cancel culture. It's not normal people, so to speak. It's the powerful who are freaking out because the people can hold them accountable, can force them to lose their jobs, can force them to lose their status, and can lean on their employers to stop these dirtbags from continuing in the line of business that they're in. Like if you're cool with having a guy who goes up behind a woman at uh, the baseball stadium and grabs her ass while she's doing a whatever some dumb video for TikTok, if you're cool with that, that guy being a salesman at your auto dealership, by the way, that's a thing that happened this last August, I believe it was. If you're cool with that guy selling cars at your dealership, fine. By the way, this is the name of the dealership. This is where he works. This dealer is cool with a sexual predator, a fucking dirtbag, being on staff at his dealership where he's interacting with people all day long. They're cool with that. And then the community can make the decision as to whether or not that's a car dealership that um, should continue to operate in obscurity, or if the fact that they hire sexual predators and keep sexual predators on the staff who are known to be sexual predators, if they're cool with that dude doing that work, then we should be able to know that they're cool with that information too. And just lay all the information out there. It's cool. And if they don't like the publicity, if they don't like the community knowing that, well, then clean it up. That's the people having power over those that are in power and holding them accountable for their decisions. And if the community says, you know what, yeah, we're cool with the Ford dealership having a dude who's a sexual predator working at the dealership, we're cool with that, then fine. The community has set the standard. The community has set their benchmark as that's cool. But if the community says, look, you're a car dealership and we're going to make sure that everybody knows that that guy's working here. The car dealership can say, you know what, that's a little bit too much publicity. We don't want that kind of publicity. We don't want that story. This guy's gone. They can make that decision too. They can all make their decisions. And it is all about accountability and it's all about openness. But 100% that same community standard was active and thriving in the 50s, hell, in the 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s. Absolutely. The guy comes home from fighting in World War II and has the audacity to wear his uniform and hold his chin up. Well, that's not acceptable in this community because his skin's darker and he's going to be tied to a fucking tree, has his testicles cut off, and we're going to beat him with sticks until he dies. That was 100% a thing that happened. And that is 100% old school cancel culture. That is how it went down. You violated a specific community standard and you lose your fucking life. You had the audacity to whistle when you were in the presence of a white girl, so you end up getting a cotton gin fan tied around your neck after you get beaten half to death and thrown off a bridge so you can die in a river and your body will bloat up from the water so that you will be nearly unrecognizable in your casket. That happened to Emmett Till. 100% analogous. 100%. Not even hyperbolically. Not even remotely hyperbolic. Absolutely 100%. I mean, it was acceptable to take children from Native Americans, put them in a orphanage, teach them English, and Americanize them. Because children growing up in their native families was not socially acceptable. Community standards, the rich and powerful, those in power, setting and enforcing standards on those who are less powerful. That's a thing that happened. But when the less powerful band together as a community and hold those in power accountable for their actions and deeds, well, now everybody freaks out because why should they lose their livelihood just because they're a dirtbag and they benefited monetarily from being a dirtbag for years? Well, the answer is they should lose their livelihood because they benefited monetarily from being a dirtbag for years. That's why. That's the answer to the question. The answer to the question is in the question. Like, why should I lose my fortune because I stole a fortune? Well, the answer is you should lose the fortune because you stole the fortune. That's why. The answer is there in the question. That's part of being held accountable. If you don't, if there's no consequences to your actions, then you're not being held accountable. That's what accountability is. And that's why community standards matter. We should be able to set them. We should be able to enforce them. And it cuts both ways because the community can stand up and say, look, that's what those people are doing. And then the rest of the community can say, yeah, we know, it's okay, it's cool. Which, by the way, is what happened all through the 50s, all through the 40s, when communities would stand up and say, that guy was the head of the lynch mob. And the rest of the community said, yeah, we know, that's Mike. He's also the mayor. We're going to elect him to another term. The whole community was like, yeah, that's cool. They knew who it was. They were openly, unremorsefully, and quite vehemently racist and enforcing those community standards. One of them uppity Negroes walking around thinking they're as good as we are. How else do you describe it? How else? What other way is there to describe it? The community standard was, this is how it's going to be, and we're cool with it. And they just shrug their shoulders and go, you know what, that's fine. That there, Mike, he's a good mayor. We're going to elect him again. It's cool. And then, other communities from outside would say, that's not right. And then that community would stand up and go, yeah, it kind of is. We're cool with that. And that's just how it be. Not only are we cool with it, we took a picture of it. It's in the newspaper. Here's a postcard. Yep. Lynching postcards were a thing. There's a whole Whole fucking Instagram. They would write little messages on the back, wish you were here, and send it in the mail to their neighbors and friends across town. Yep, yep, yep. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Um, let's keep going. My great grandfather would have been a slave because he was white. He was what? Okay. Wow. Hey, what slot? Oh, got it. I thought that was a bot because I thought that was one of those SLE.VTE website things. Da, 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 da. Personal beliefs or opinions. James Damore. Let me look up James Damore. James Damore. Google's ID. What? James Damore. Is that the guy who called out Google for their shitty culture inside? Yeah, that's the guy who wrote the memo, the internal memo, calling out Google's shitty internal culture. That is not. Well, that is. Uh, that's a whistleblower who didn't have whistleblower protection. He was not personal beliefs or opinion. Uh, I mean, he got fired from Google. What's he doing these days? I mean, he canceling. I think him being canceled is a little bit overstating. Uh, let's see here. I vaguely remember that story. I can't speak enough about it. I don't know enough about that story to be able to speak about it. Uh, what I remember was the internal memo, and it was something about the interior culture that it was toxic, and they're like, we don't need your kind around here, and they got rid of him. Um, I think, but like I said, I don't know enough about it to speak about it, so I'm not going to speak about it. Sorry. We'll do another show about it. I'll look into it. We'll do another show about it. I'll see if I can educate myself about the situation. But I would disagree that well, I would agree that people's beliefs and opinions would get them. Uh, I disagree that it would be slander or libel, but I would agree that it would be personal beliefs and opinions because personal beliefs and opinions can absolutely run counter to community standards. And I'll keep repeating the phrase community standard because I believe my personal belief is that community standards is well within our rights to establish and well within our rights to defend. Um, and when people run afoul of their community, the community absolutely has a right to cast them out. And when you have personal beliefs and opinions that run, there are some communities that do not tolerate a difference of opinions and a difference in personal beliefs. There are certain Orthodox churches and Orthodox faiths that will not allow you to continue to be a member of that community if you have a different uh, personal belief system, faith system. Uh, there are certain super Orthodox. I mean, the Baptists, fucking Baptists will boot you out of church if um, you know, if you want to go dancing. There was a whole movie about that. Kevin Bacon saved a whole town. Um, George Herbert Walker Bush changed his publicly stated personal beliefs and politics in order to be selected as vice presidential nominee for President Reagan. George Herbert Walker Bush was not opposed to abortion prior to 1980. True fact. He changed that opinion, changed that belief so that he would be accepted into a particular community with a particular standard. Personal beliefs and opinions can 100% get you booted out of various communities. Some communities just aren't, they don't tolerate. Some communities are open. And one of the things that an old pastor of mine would say, we vehemently disagree on things that are non essential, but we vehemently agree on things that are essential. And that's, if your personal belief and opinion goes counter to a community's personal belief or opinion on things that are they consider to be essential, then you separate. In the case of the United States, the personal belief and opinion that caused a separation of 13 states from the other states was that black people shouldn't be slaves and they should be included as equals in the citizenry of the United States. And 13 states were vehemently opposed to that opinion. 13 states were vehemently opposed to that personal belief. They had different opinions and different beliefs. They stated it as much, and they separated, disunited from the United States of America. There was a whole war. There was a thing. It lasted 4 years. Very unfortunate circumstance in our history. And there's a whole period of, reconstruction and trying to change that belief, and then there was a whole another period of certain states reinforcing that belief for another 80 years or so. It was a whole thing. But yeah, absolutely, personal beliefs, and again, nothing wrong with that, unless it's opinions on non-essential things and personal beliefs on non-essential things. I mean, I don't want you to be my science teacher. I will absolutely tell the principal of my kid's school, if the science teacher is teaching kids that the earth is flat, I will absolutely tell them that teacher needs to be removed from the fucking classroom. That is a essential. It's not even opinion. It may be a personal belief, but that is not a debatable point. Get the fuck out. Not a debatable point. That I consider to be an essential, non-negotiable. You want to come in here and argue that? It's going to be the last argument we have. That's it. I'm not going to put up with that shit. Send you on your way. But that's me. Other people are much more tolerant of that nonsense. I'm not. I've got, there's way too few hours in the day to waste any breath and any time on that debate and that argument. It's not a debate. It's not an argument to be had. Anyway, what we got? SJR. What is SJR? Sally Jesse Raphael. Thank you. Okay. I'm not the only person who remembers that name. I just didn't recognize the initials. All right. See you later, John Jacobs. Thank you for joining the party. And I am very close to catching up with chat. Holy Christ, it's almost 1 o'clock. Guys, y'all have kept me around for 2 hours longer than I wanted to be here. That's fine, though. Why would you want to... Well, exactly. Well, see, that was the thing. I didn't want to associate myself with the... I had to remember what it was I was talking about. I didn't want to associate myself with the other vendors. I didn't mind associating myself with the show and their audience. The show and their audience, that weren't terrible people. Then, not that I knew. The people I knew were decent enough people. I didn't want to associate myself with the other vendors. And if my opinion of the people in the show, the showrunners, the producers, the show managers, changed drastically when they chose to stand with neo-Nazis versus, and it's their choice. But my opinion of them changed drastically after that. It was just a few conversations. I mean, we're not talking this. This didn't last for like months. This was just like 3 or 4 conversations. And it was like, this is what I would love to advertise with you guys, but I'm not going to advertise with those guys. And if you want me, you're going to have to get rid of them. But I don't think you're going to get rid of them, so I don't think you really want me. They're like, yeah, we're not going to get rid of them. They're longstanding. It was like 3 messages back and forth. I'm like, okay, that's it. I know who y'all are, and I don't want to be associated with that. But thanks. If something changes in the future, I'll and that was it. It wasn't so much of a negotiation. It was just kind of understanding where we all stand and understanding the lines and knowing who would cross and what lines they would cross. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like papers did not transfer back and forth across the desk. This was not even remotely that advanced. This was just uh, literally us knowing where everybody stands, and cool. Wasn't even a handshake and parting ways. It was just a okay. I understand. Thank you. That was it. Done and done. Um, keep going. Um, 19 days, 16. Yeah. I'll just leave that there. No comment necessary. Um, uh, so many human slaves. I'm going to roll this up just a little bit there. Only one race, many race slaves to other races. Humans don't even realize how the. Okay, not going to dive deep. I'm just going to kind of scroll down into more. Da 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 da. Face with steam and nose. All right, I think we are pretty much. Where did. Yeah, it did escalate quickly. But I think we're done. I think we're pretty much to the end of the queue of chat. I took part in lynching. All I got was this commemorative plaque. Yeah, that's. Um, oh yeah, okay. So personal beliefs, opinions, things aren't. I get you. I get you on that. Um, and that's that is a fair. That's a fair statement. Things that aren't proven in fact would be personal beliefs, but a lot of times personal belief is also just simply counterfactual. Well, that's just what I believe. I don't give a shit if that's what you believe. 2 plus 2 isn't equal to 5. I don't care if that's what you believe. We're not going to agree to disagree. You're just fucking wrong. That's it. It doesn't matter if that's what you believe. If that's what you believe something is wrong. But also personal beliefs, things that aren't fact. There's a whole lot of people that believe in a whole lot of conspiracies. That is adorable. Don't get me wrong. It is absolutely 100% adorable. Um, and I used to find people who were conspiracy theorists to be at least amusing because uh, they would make up fun stories and they could make up interesting stories and fun stories and sometimes they were fun to listen to. But that was before the age of the almighty algorithm when you would sit down and you would go into your keyboard. Tell me more about the magic bullet and grassy knoll theory and hit enter. And YouTube would give you all the videos on the JFK assassination and why the JFK assassination was controversial, the findings were controversial, and all that stuff. This is how it used to be in the old days prior to YouTube and Facebook. You'd go to the library and you pull a book and you pull another book and you sit down and you read them, and the librarian wouldn't come up to you and go, "Oh, you're reading about the Kennedy assassination, are you? Well, let me show you a couple of more books. This one's about the aliens that built the pyramids. This one's about Sasquatch. And oh, by the way, did you also know that 9/11 was an inside job? And Sandy Hook was a false flag operation, and then just give you a whole nother stack of books that are loosely attached to conspiracy theories because you like this one conspiracy theory. Like that's not what happened in the 70s and 80s when you were researching a topic. But today, when you research a topic and you're like, I'm just kind of curious about that whole magic bullet theory. And then next thing you know, you've just spent 45 hours researching or looking at videos about how chemicals in our water are making frogs gay, and that's how we know fluoride is bad for us because the chemicals in our water that are making frogs gay are the same chemicals that are making our kids' taints smaller, and that's why men now are more feminine and less masculine than men 40 years ago because of fluoride and a shrinking taint because of gay frogs. Yes, that is a conspiracy theory promulgated by YouTube conspiracy boogerheads, specifically Alex Jones, but also others. So that said, I used to find conspiracy theories to be interesting, at least. They were fun stories, even if they were like clear gaping holes in the stories. They were fun stories, they were entertaining. But now they just seem to be dangerous because you start off with, like, why do they think that the Twin Towers were the Twin Tower terrorist attack was an inside job? I mean, we saw the video with the planes. Like, there was live video of planes hitting the buildings. Like, the people were on the planes. The people are missing. Like, what happened to all of that? Like, I'm curious. I want to know more. Please tell me more. Tappa, 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 enter. And the next thing you know, you've got a gun on your back. You're kicking down the door of a pizza parlor in New York because in the basement of the pizza parlor, they're harvesting adrenochrome from terrified infants because it's not a very long trip from point A to point B when you have the algorithm feeding you nonsense, a steady diet of nonsense, of pure nonsense. And these people can hold deeply held beliefs. And for me personally, at least, my personal community standard is when you start telling me about this nonsensical bullshit personally held belief that you have, I will take my drink and go to the next table. But there's other beliefs, like, life begins at conception. That is a deeply held personal belief. Um, it's a personal belief that, to a large extent, I share, but I also hold a deeply held personal belief that it's nobody else's business what we do with our reproductive decisions in my household. Um, and we've been through enough shit. I don't want to get into any deeper personal stuff than that, but we've been through enough shit in this house that, uh, me and my lovely wife can take those decisions into our own hands quite nicely. Thank you very much. Of course, we're also both in our mid 40s and we're done. We do not want to have more kids. Um, and but that's a whole nother discussion to be had. And there's a whole group of people that would not have me associate with them because of my own personal, deeply held personal beliefs. There's a whole group of people that I can vehemently disagree with, and we can still perfectly well associate with each other. But then there's a whole another group of people that we could personally disagree, and I don't want them associating with me because not only do we personally disagree, they think I'm less of a person because of that disagreement, and they can fuck off and suck my butthole out. I don't care. Um, but again, we all have our own personal community standards uh, can radiate out in concentric circles that get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, depending and overlap with different communities. Uh, the community that I'm in here, like literally my neighborhood, my friends, my family, my city, my state, my professional associations, my alumni groups, my marketing associations that I associate myself with the various groups, my YouTube communities, my several different YouTube communities, my uh, oh, I felt that yawn coming on. I didn't want to. My social circles, my entertainment circle, like vast, radiating, concentric, and overlapping communities. Um, I don't fit into all of them neatly, and I don't fit into all of them perfectly. And there are some where I fit in, and the interactions that I have with the people in those communities, I would not be able to have with people in other communities. Um, Code shifting is the term that is used among African Americans when you slide between your uh, white communities and black communities. You slide back and forth. It's code shifting. Um, it's not unlike what everybody does when they shift in between their various communities. It's maybe not as drastic as it is when you go from um, hanging out with your black friends and your white friends, but when you're hanging out with uh, the people at work versus the people at the bar, you're not really the same. You're the same person, but different aspects of your personality shine through when you're with different people. Um, and that is part of being a member of a community. That is part of being a member of several communities, and that is part of abiding by community standards. I would hope that you do not behave the same way in a boat on the lake with a cooler full of beer as you do in the pews of your church. I would hope that you have a slightly deeper sense of decorum when you're in the office or at church or at your kids' oboe recital or whatever the hell you're doing, versus when you're wearing your uh, flip flops and bathing suit on a boat in a lake. I would hope that you have a slightly different sense of decorum and a more moderated behavior in one location versus the other. But and I mean, maybe some churches are cool like that, and maybe some high schools are cool like that. When you go to the oboe recital and you're just like, yeah, fuck it, woo, or you throwing beers on the stage. Maybe they are, maybe not. I don't know. That's your community. That's how you roll. It's cool. But that said, this has been a fun discussion. I enjoy talking about this. I don't think me saying that I don't think cancel culture exists is not saying that I don't think that community standards exist, because they absolutely do. And you can run yourself afoul of a community standard and uh, fully be ostracized and shut off from working in that community ever again. I I know of several people that worked in the banking world that are not allowed to work with the banking world again because they ran afoul of their bank's community standards. Most of them worked with Wells Fargo, uh, and they got shown the door with, oh goodness, sorry, excuse me, it's getting late. They were shown the door after Wells Fargo's scandal about the extra, whatchamacallits, account scandal. And they can't work in the business anymore. They weren't the whistleblowers, but they were vocal complainers about it. They were shown the door. They're not allowed to work in the banks anymore because they have been ostracized from that community. They ran afoul of the community standards. It's the powerful people enforcing community standards on the weaker people. The flip side of that was that whistleblowers organized with other people and have held the people who caused that scandal accountable, and made them lose their jobs, made them be removed from their places of power because they were forced to be held accountable. Now they're just going to have to go home and roll around in all that money that they made, but uh, that is how community standards work. The There's a set of rules, you enforce them, and that is how, in the case of the employees that are no longer able to work, that is how the banks maintain their power structure and their culture. It's a shitty culture and it's a shitty power structure, but that's how they maintain it. And the flip side of that is that's how the people flex their voice and show their organizing ability, and that they cannot just be shit upon uh, mercilessly, but they will hold the people in power accountable. And When they can pull that off, they can pull that off. They can't always pull that off. Um, Sometimes they can. And social media makes it easier for them to do that. So uh, I've said it before. I've been on record saying it before. I'll say it again, and I'll say it to anybody who'll listen. Community standards are a good thing. They help us maintain our identity as communities, and they help us understand how to interact with other human beings, which is ultimately what it's all about. Being able to interact with other human beings and be able to interact on a predictable and basic standard with your fellow men and women and undecideds. Um, so that said, I still have a little drink left. I hope you have a little drink left. Let's raise our glasses. And of course, glory to Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine's heroes. Be awesome to each other. Love with your entire heart. Think with your brain. That's what it's there for. And uh, do something adventurous and be awesome to each other. Cheers. Thank you for joining us tonight. I do truly appreciate it. It's been fun. We'll be back tomorrow night with trivia. Me and Lisa, 1980s Trivia Pursuit trivia. Cheers and good night. Ugh.